Tēnā koutou katoa, ko Rachel Rees toku ingoa, ko roti koro mātua whakatū. Nā mahari mai, welcome back to our reconvened council meeting. We've got quite a number of items to move through today, and I've just been talking with the councillors. If we stay really focused on the items, we might have a shot of getting them through by about 5 o'clock today, but if not, we will need to come back next week on next Thursday. So starting today, we are up to the Mayor's report. I'll just check before I do that. Does anyone have need to let me know about ducking out of the meeting today, just so I can maintain quorum, or times where they've got a hard leave where they need to go? Anybody I need to know from? Councillor Noonan?
4 o'clock.
Thank you.
Same.
4 o'clock, Councillor Bowater. All right, so 2 at 4. 5 o'clock for Councillor McGurk. Anybody else? Councillor Rainey.
Separate question. I was under the impression that we could leave papers here overnight. Is it possible to get another yellow folder?
Yes, just over.
Oh, okay.
On the credenza. All right, so I've made a note of those times. So we've just got a note of those so that we can see where we are for quorum. Right, we're going to get underway with the Mayor's report. We're on page 77 of the agenda. There's a few items highlighted in the Mayor's report, and there's an amendment to the clause 2 that Elaine or Robin will pop up on the screen in a moment. So starting with first update is around the representation review. You'll see that there has been an appeal, so that matter will now be considered by the Local Government Commission, so that appeal is attached. We have the continuation of the future development strategy work, and we've agreed to do joint hearings with Tasman District Council, so we need to make sure we've done our appointments process for that. I have noted the contributions I've made through the Mayoral Discretionary Fund, and we've also noted the Emergency Fund expenditure to date. So those are the items in the Mayor's report. And because of the number of items, I'm not going to do any other updates today. I'll do Christmas message separately. So with what's on the screen, there is a change there just to, given the time constraints around this piece of work for the FDS and the number of dates we're trying to sequence, both Mayor King and I have had a discussion around this, and we're doing the same or very similar things for both councils. I'll move my Mayor's report, and then Councillor Skinner's happy to second it. Thank you. And any debate? No debate, no questions. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. We're moving now to the resident survey item. That is page 203 to 205 of your agenda. I understand that Councillor Eager has sent through an additional clause that should be with the governance advisors, I hope, for that one. We'll just roll that up. And we are on 203. Louis, welcome to the meeting. Good to have you here. First up, are there any corrections or additions that you need to make to the report?
Through the chair, no additional corrections.
I will take it as read, and then I'm going to open for questions. Any questions? Councillor Sanson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I sent my questions through. So the first one is on page 204, 4.1, the table shows that the overall satisfaction with council performance is the lowest it's been in 5 years. And I was wondering if we have comparable data back a further 5 years, i.e. what is the 10-year trend? And looking at, I've been directed to the additional attachments. So looking back over the 10-year trend, it looks like actually it's really hard to see because that's also 2011, 12, 13, 14, 15. Yeah, so it looks like in that this is, so the resident survey is maybe the lowest satisfaction in 10 years and a 10-year trend. Is that, yeah, that is correct. Is that correct? Sorry.
Through the chair, yes, over that 10-year period, the 43% overall satisfaction is the lowest.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a pretty challenging year for everybody. So I was wondering, do we have any idea of what it's been for other councils around the country? Do councils compare that kind of information, or?
Through the chair, I don't have the exact numbers for other councils. We understand there were drops for some other councils of our similar size from the year before. And from looking recently for Wellington City Council and Auckland Council, for instance, they had quite not large drops, but they were of low satisfaction levels.
So down, but not as significant a drop as.
Not as significant a drop, but lower satisfaction than Nelson City Council.
Thanks very much. And then my next question was around on page 207 at 4.2, the comment around basically seeking advertising to subsidise putting additional local content into the Our Nelson magazine. So I wondered if that would be directly competing with our other local community papers like the Nelson Weekly and the Leader, and what kind of engagement we might have had with them and what their response was.
Through the chair, I don't believe that we've engaged directly with them about this, but it would only be about 9 ads a month, which is very small. TDC already do that, and our understanding from them is the sort of advertisers who advertise with council, not so much those who would use a local community newspaper. They're often quite focused on things relating to council. And also, we do also support those community newspapers with a lot of our own advertising. So we think on balance, it actually sends a good message to the community about looking for ways to supplement ratepayer funding when we can do that.
So just 2 additional questions then. Was there a process, what was the process followed in kind of coming to that decision? And then I'll just give you both questions. And then the other one is, do we have a media or an advertising policy? Are we going to accept advertisements from gun shops or alcohol stores or fossil fuel suppliers or banks that invest in fossil fuels or political candidates, or are we going to be developing a really robust advertising policy? Because I could imagine otherwise we could get ourselves into a world of trouble.
Through the chair, yes, we were planning to be pretty conservative in the approach. So I don't know that it would stretch to looking at where banks invested if they were investing in fossil fuel companies, but certainly the other examples you gave would be ones that we wouldn't be looking to use.
And then just the process followed around the decision to do this?
So that through the chair, that was a matter of looking at what happens elsewhere. We particularly spoke a lot to TDC about their experience. They've done this for a long time and it's been pretty successful. Also knowing that there's actually a lot of material that doesn't fit into the current size of our Nelson, and looking for ways to do that without putting extra cost into the operational budget. And then talking to our designers, Hothouse and so on, about how it might work and with the scope of the paper.
Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you. So some follow-up questions around that policy development. So and digital advertising. So I think there's quite and I'm just going to say I guess I do have a concern around how we would address the advertising and what might happen, how we'd say yes and no. So I did see some in answer to that, because Councillor Sanson had pre-circulated her questions and had the answers, and we had things like we might provide advertising for contracting companies in our publication. Is there not a risk that could be seen as, these are people that we're engaging with in terms of tenders and contracts? Is that something that could be perceived as, showing some bias? I'm just wondering really about, the policy context around this and the fact that the governance tables had absolutely no input at all into this. But what I'm concerned about is that if you say no, then I know whose inbox the complaints are going to come to, and I'm not quite sure how we're going to deal with that. So for instance, if an organisation was wanting to run, a public meeting on I'll go on a vaccination stance, I'll use that one as it's topical. How would we deal with that? Would we, how are you going to approach those sorts of matters?
So we've talked to TDC about their experience, and it's gone very smoothly, and they haven't had those sorts of complaints because it's up to council who it chooses to accept as an advertiser. And so we would expect that we would just have a policy which we'd put through SLT about the types of advertising we would accept, and then staff would make an assessment on each of those ads.
All right. Well, I'm just really flagging the potential for freedom of speech, equal opportunity to be raised as concerns. I'm just flagging that as something that does concern me. I'm not overly convinced that advertising is the issue that we have with our Nelson. I think probably, I think there's a range of matters. So just, I can see you looking at that, but I think there's also a question of making the content actually more interesting. And I think that's something that we really need to look at. I think from my perspective, while we make decisions in this chamber and we're doing decisions, reporting in a style of, on this date, council made a decision to do this, is not an engaging style for the public. It's around the why we're doing it and what we're doing. So I think there's probably a bigger conversation around actually what does engage. And one thing I'm interested in as a question is, what is our readership of our Nelson? What data do we have to establish how it's, whether it's read and actually people's responses to our Nelson? Have we done survey data? Have we got survey data to support that?
Through the chair, I might get the manager of our comms team to come to speak to that.
Thank you. We'll have to come back to that. Right, moving on with questions. I have got Councillor Laurie, Councillor Brand, and Councillor Noonan.
I'm okay, thanks.
Councillor Brand.
Thank you. Through the Mayor. Just on 4.2, where it's got about the satisfaction levels higher due to the COVID-19 and the council response, does the analysis show that the drop down on this one was expected because of that variance? Like, has that also been what's shown across other councils as well?
Through the chair, yes. So the provider noted that was one of the factors that could have contributed to the drop. So it was present in for other councils that there was a drop back from the year before.
Can you move the closer when you speak? Sorry. Okay, so the variance could be explained because of the high increase in satisfaction previously because of the COVID response. So therefore, the expectation is as time moves on, you would expect a greater drop down to what would be more of a normal level of expectation by the resident survey?
Through the chair, it wasn't necessarily that we would continue to drop lower. If we're looking at the diagram after 4.1, it shows that over that 10-year trend, it was tracking between the 40s to 60s. So there wasn't necessarily an expectation to continue track lower, just that from the provider's point of view, there was an increase for 2019-20. So the drop for 2020-21 could partly be related to that.
Okay, and then with 4.5 and 4.6 about the dissatisfaction around the communication, is that why we've now got D up there in the resolutions so that we can actually front foot and be more timely in our communications to go out with the community so that we're actually leading the conversation instead of reacting? Is that why that's there?
Councillor Brand, that's an addition from Councillor Eager, so you'll have to wait for Councillor Eager to speak to that.
Okay. That's the question for that then. Then my other question was, does it now tie into that or does it? So the questions in the resident survey, because I hear this myself from the community, is that they don't find the questions relevant. But I understand that you have to have a benchmark and then have comparisons so that you can get the trends. Is there a way, or are the questions in the resident survey have the ability to actually move in a way so it still becomes consistent for the trend tracking, or can we start a new baseline with some fresh questions that are probably a bit more relevant to where the direction of council is and where the community sit?
So through the chair, to maintain those trends, we would have to keep similar questions, but it is possible to change questions. Questions have been changed over time through different surveys, and we do continue to refine the questions to make sure that they're either aligning with a long-term plan performance measure or of value to the teams. And that's a matter usually we would take first to SLT on potential amendments to questions. So it is possible too.
Okay, so it would need to be a staged approach, is that what you're saying? Okay.
Through the chair, could I just add a point on that? So there's been quite a bit of work around the Te Tau Ihu intergenerational strategy about a different way of surveying, and so we're involved in that discussion. So we are looking at something of a sea change in the type of questions being asked to support that work from the beginning of the next financial year.
Councillor Noonan?
Checking, Councillor Edgar had her hand up and I'm not sure whether she was before me or whether you've captured that. I didn't want to take her spot.
I have captured
Great,
Councillor
okay.
Noonan.
I'd like to go back to 4.20 and just about the advertising, and we've heard that there will be policy ends taken to SLT. Is there a possibility for us to have a look at that as well? Because as the Mayor said, we hear it first. So will there be a possibility for some input on that? Who's answering?
Through the chair, yes.
That'll be great, thank you. I would quite like, if we pursue the advertising idea, I'd like a review put onto that after a reasonably short period of time, probably June next year, just to see how it's going. I'll let the staff suggest a timeline on it, but I think we should be reviewing it to see if it's working or not.
So you'd like to include a review of whether the advertising is working or not?
Once it's
Once it's in place?
I'd like some sort of review on it.
Review period, all right.
So we don't have to have a problem with it, we can review
Well, I
it.
think you'd need a year really to bed it in. I think it would be, you'd want to put a year.
Through the chair, yeah, I think that would be prudent to give it some
Okay.
time.
All right.
Of course, if there are problems beforehand.
Okay,
And
so
it is a new thing, so.
so in that case, then I think what we'd do, and I'd like that recorded as a resolution, because a year out from now, no one's going to look at a note in the minutes. And so we need to make sure we just add a clause
Or maybe
in
the
there.
policy is just reviewed annually.
I think, is it the policy or the
Oh, that she's coming
effectiveness?
under the, if it's coming under the resident survey, maybe it's part of that process.
No, it
do
won't be
a-
coming under the resident survey. So if, Councillor Noonan, I've been here long enough to know that unless you actually record something in a resolution for a review, it tends to get
I
lost.
like
So,
that. I like that
okay.
idea, so I'll let
so
that.
we'll just have to attend to that in a moment. We'll
I'll
take
let
a
them think
pause.
about that. I've got a couple of other questions. So at the moment, the, is it our Nelson? It's our Nelson at the moment, as it changes. Don't know whether it's Live or Live or, the current circulation doesn't reach everyone, Madam Mayor, and that is a concern to me. And with information that's coming from council, if we're relying on that, when older people don't have access to digital devices, which we know is a problem, don't we, councillor? People getting their vaccine certificates has been an issue. So that's sort of raised the reason behind actually making sure we get our publications out further. There was a proposal to have stands in the city for this. Has that happened?
Through the chair, that's going to be introduced at the same time as the advertising. So we are in the process of purchasing those 10 stands, and I've discussed with you previously, Councillor Noonan, about where they would go and the locations for that, because I agree that there are gaps in the delivery that we can address through that.
Great, okay, thank you. Could they possibly come out before the advertising so it's not dependent on that?
I can look into that.
Great, thank you.
Fantastic. Kim, you're just coming back to talk about the survey results on now, Nelson.
So we haven't, through the chair, we haven't done a specific survey on readership of our Nelson. And I know from speaking to other councils that have done specific surveys on the communication and how people receive news from councils, that it's a very beneficial exercise, and it helps them project where they need to put their resource in the future. So I've had ongoing conversations with Marlborough about the survey that they have done specifically on how people receive information. And I am looking at the possibility of doing likewise here for Nelson. There's obviously a cost involved, but I think it would be a good thing to do.
So, okay, so at this stage, we don't, but you think there is a methodology that could
I think it's a methodology, but I think it's a little bit wider than our Nelson. It's looking at all of our channels, and I think that that's important to consider them at once. So there is a methodology. It basically asks people where they've heard news from the council in the last 6 months, how they prefer to receive news, etc., etc.
So just in terms of timing of doing that work, when were you thinking?
Next year, I'd like to be able to do it. I just need to look at budgets and funding and see whether I can get extra funding for that work.
All right. Well, I think that's really important because we do feel this is a really important area. So I'll just note that now I haven't seen the operational budgets yet for the annual plan. So we'll need to make sure that that's captured so that you can get on and do that work. Has everyone agreed on that? That seems like a very good, wise investment. Okay, thank you. Thanks, Kim. All right. Next on my list was Councillor McGurk. And then it was Councillor Eager. Sorry, Councillor Eager. It's Councillor Eager, then it's Councillor McGurk, and it's Councillor Skinner, and then it's Councillor Laurie.
Thank you. Sorry, I just missed one point. There was a proposed resolution about a review, but did I also hear that the policy was going to come to council for sign off? Sorry, could that just be clarified firstly?
To the officers.
Through the chair, yes, we can bring that to council to see.
Okay, so that might need to be part of the resolution as well. I'm cognizant that Tasman and Nelson audiences are quite different. How they get their news is actually quite different as well. You know, Tasman residents rely on, more grassroots community, like lower than the community newspapers, the local newsletters. So I'm just wondering if it would be beneficial to do the more nuanced survey that Ms. Grade is talking about first, prior to implementing any changes, because we may then find out that we don't need to expand Live Nelson, we need to do something else. So I'm just wondering if, with maybe putting the cart before the horse, because, you invest time and energy into changing it to then find out that the public actually prefer different mediums or different things.
Thanks, Kim.
Through the chair, yeah, I think that's a good point, and I'm happy to explore doing the survey first.
Fantastic. I just think that would be a really great idea. And if I can just sort of add, I think at some stage just a review of our surveying would be good, because I believe more nuanced surveys are what we need to do. So, for example, with transport, we only have very high level questions in the resident survey, but actually, again, we need more nuanced answers to inform our infrastructure investment, especially around walking and cycling. So yeah, I think that would be really good. Can I respond to Councillor Brand's question, Madam Mayor?
Yes, please. Now will be good.
Yes, so it's not necessarily a critical resolution as in being critical of existing, but it's about just putting it at the forefront that we need to really have timeliness in mind always, and sometimes we'll lead, sometimes we'll follow. It's not just about resolutions of decisions around the council table, but often it's just about information. We talked yesterday about the revaluations, and I see something's already gone out, which is fantastic, but it's just always, we have such a critical role in informing the community, even when it's not necessarily our processes. And so it's just keeping that timeliness. And I've said clear because it's always about the audience, because councils and governments have a lot of their own language, and it's just making sure we always have our audience in mind. Thank you.
Okay, hopefully that makes sense. Yes, Councillor Brand's nodding. That's happy with that. All right, next on the list is, so there's a few things just to pick up from there. One was do the survey work first. So we'll actually find out, so we're working from an evidence base as best as we can, then moving on to the next step. So this might require a little bit of recrafting. So I'm going to have to take a pause on this item just so I can have a discussion with the officers before we go into moving what's on the screen. Councillor McGurk, Councillor Skinner, Councillor Laurie and Councillor O'Neill-Stevens.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Mayor. Perhaps first one is the 3 focus, should be 4 focus areas up there. The other one, I'm heartened by the voice, the responses from Ms. Gard, but I was just looking at a more broader way of actually collecting the data over a more sustained period. A telephone interview 4 times a year, it gives you an average. It's very much a snapshot in time, and I don't, whatever is the issue du jour tends to persuade. So I'm just wondering if, and I'm heartened by the response about a broader methodology about more real-time feedback in terms of consumer of our services, the use of our libraries, people who come in to sort of speak to the planning officers about resource consents, which seems to be an area you get a lot of feedback, just a way of a more immediate, more timely response. Use a simple example is every time I seem to use something, I get an email from the provider saying, how was my experience, score 1 to 10 or something like that, and or you go through, you come out of an office and there's a little iPad there on a stand, how do you rate the experience? Give us 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 stars or whatever it is. So I'm just looking for a bit of thought about getting more immediate response from the users of our services throughout the whole year, rather than just these waves we get just using one medium. But I'm heartened by your response, so I think that probably requires a bit more budget and some thought.
So I think we're discussing 2 things here. So we're discussing our communications.
Well, it's a resident survey, and it is what it is. We've got the focus areas and get that, but I think that should actually go, propel us into some action about, okay, if there's an issue, one, have we identified the issue correctly, and is our response the appropriate response to that particular issue?
All right, so I think there are 2 parts of this. So one is around the communications, what we're communicating in the survey work around that, how people want to get information. The second part that Councillor McGurk's discussing is how frequently we receive feedback around our services and the work that we do, and what methodology that we've got that we're thinking about. Because yes, the resident survey is one method, and it's important that we have it for consistency, but actually, a telephone survey is, I think there are many people that just will not respond to a telephone survey. So, while we may do the demographics, I'm just not sure it's going to give us the touch points to get timely feedback. So, Louis, maybe that's a question back for you in terms of the thinking from the resident survey and actually how we get that feedback. What are your thoughts around that? If the team thought about what else we're doing other than resident survey?
Through the chair, we have looked at, the provider has discussed that there are further opportunities that you could include, such as online surveys. And so that has been an option to investigate further in the future to accompany a telephone survey. So that is one option that we were going to consider as part of the wider work around the wellbeing indicators that Nikki highlighted, but that would still be tied to the resident survey. I might defer to Nikki in relation to the others.
Through the chair, just to add, there are many different channels that we get feedback from. So it's we look at complaints. There are registers of comments at some of our facilities. We talk to the contractors. There's a continual stream of feedback which supplements. Resident survey, as you say, is just one element. So when asset management plans are put together, particularly, all of those streams are considered.
I'm not sure that quite addresses Councillor McGurk's.
Yeah, well, I'll use an example as the library consistently gets a high levels of satisfaction. Our residents love the libraries, and but we could also, just putting an iPad on the way in or out says, how was the experience today? Would be one way of actually verifying the feedback. But it gives you a bit more timely, and if it's done continuously, you can actually pick in trends. There's something happened there that if you're getting 1,000 feedback a day and it's going into an algorithm, something like that, and you're finding, if you're picking up trends, if there's something's happening there that causes that to go up, what are we doing right? If it's going down, what's happened that's caused that to happen? But I think getting as much data from as many sources over the longer period of time, and the more frequently you do it, you get a better accuracy, and it actually allows you to respond in a more timely manner. We're talking about something that's happened with this resident survey. Here we are 6 months after the year, so it's we're actually talking about stuff that happened 18 months ago. That's not very timely.
No, okay, so I think we have.
I think there's a piece of work outside
I think there's a piece of work. I think there's a piece of work to come. I think that's right. So I think, can we just gauge from the other elected members? I feel like Councillor Big and I are having our own conversation here. So just in terms of the rest of council, I just want to get some indication. I think it's really important that we do have, what's the performance assessment is, and if we can have it on not necessarily on a continuous basis, but if we're tracking and finding trends, then we want to be responsive as an organisation to our community, our customers. So I think there is a piece of work here. If I can think about the interactions that I'll have from organisations, I can tell you they're very quick to give me an email after I've had an experience, to say, yeah, we'd really like you to tell us how this was. If I walk through the security, not that I do that anymore these days, the security at airports, go through, press the happy face to the, whatever it is, it's, all those sorts of things to do. Now, whether we feel that is of value, whether we do some focus groups on parts of our organisation where we really want to know how things are going, I think there's a discussion here. I think it's probably a bring it back for a discussion, and maybe it's a discussion, I'm just going to look at the Chief Executive, maybe that's a conversation with the Chair of the Audit Risk Committee just to think around, what that would look like. It seems to fit in that space. But I'll just get your thoughts on that. I'm not going to suggest we do that today because I think we've got enough on our plate to get through today, but I just want this conversation to be captured.
Look, I absolutely agree with some of the comments that have been made about more timely data. That's why we started doing these surveys quarterly, so that we weren't caught by a spike at the end of the year. But the more information we have, and the more, and there's lots of techniques where we can gather, as Councillor McGurk was talking about, the rate your experience as you leave one of our facilities is a very cheap and easy way to pick up that sort of feedback. So look, we'll have a discussion internally about how we proceed with that. Who we report back to on that, I don't know if it's audit, risk and finance.
No, I wasn't thinking around the reporting back. It was more around a discussion with the Audit Risk Finance Chair and the thinking around, what might be useful. So from a...
Yep, happy to do that.
Okay, thank you. All right. So what we'll do is that will be, Councillor McGurk, are you happy with that? That will have to come back. I don't think I can deal with that today. All right, thank you. Councillor Skinner.
Thank you for that. Just quickly back on that communications Facebook, and I've raised that before. I think we need to seriously look at whether we use Facebook, continue using Facebook for a communication. I think sometimes we're not using it that responsibly, and I think going back to paper-based or even the letterbox drop is very effective. But I am concerned that human nature, we can sort of bias on the Facebook, how we respond to comments or not accept comments, etc. on there.
Do you talk on council's Facebook page?
Councils, as in our official
one?
Official
Yes.
one. Obviously, people can do their own, but as far as official one, I haven't been overly impressed, to be honest. But I know the Nelson Mail, for example, stopped using Facebook for their media for probably similar reasons. But the other one, we're talking about keeping like a live survey being a live ongoing thing. That's pretty much what we are councillors here for. So we are the barometer. We are the live feedback from the public. So if things aren't going well or going well, what we're doing, I think, is if we're trying to do it by algorithms or staff or trying to work out what's on here and when and on the air, then you're really just doing a job that councillors are there for. We're the canary in the coal mine, really. So yeah, you'll certainly find out there's not much oxygen down there. The other thing is my feedback on this resident survey is that I don't see anything in the recommendation on taking ownership or reflecting on where we've failed or where we've been out of step with the public. I mean, what we've got here is in those recommendations seems to be trying to make excuses, to be blunt, for the dissatisfaction feedback we've got from the public, managing expectations clearly, improving quality of decision making, telling our story positively. I don't see any of those actually taking responsibility, saying, hey, we need to do this or do that to make decisions, better decisions. And I tend to think, my own view is that much of that reflection is on decisions we've made which don't sit with the public or not accepted on the same.
I'd agree with you, Councillor Skinner. So I have actually just made a note myself that we haven't got a connection from receiving and noting the survey. We'll put it on to then the areas for improvement. So we haven't got the link back to the fact that actually we're not happy with that result.
No.
And we do think, and we've had workshop sessions to discuss this, to say we didn't want to just receive it and pop it on the website. We want to acknowledge that that's not where we want to be, and we want to take some actions to improve the results. So I think we are missing something. So you'll have to give me a pause to work
I'll probably shadow an amendment that may or may not be needed, but any organisation or company or community group worth their grain of salt, they would be going shivers. What are we doing wrong? What are we doing which is not providing the service for the customer or providing the customer?
Absolutely, and that's why we've had those sessions. Yeah,
we can say we had a tough year, but no, I think this has been extremely poor in a sense of the feedback of dissatisfaction. I'll say it again, I think it's because public are dissatisfied with the decisions that we've made, and us as being those canaries in the coal mine or the barometer of where we should be sailing a ship, I think we have been out of touch, being blunt, and I think we need to acknowledge that and own it in our report.
All right, we need to just have a think about how we just do that connection, and I'll go on to who's next. Councillor Laurie is next up. Just before I go to Councillor Laurie, though, I am just going to note that one of the things in the questions and answers I'm going back is that we have made we've made some, I don't call them, I would pretend that Councillor Courtney is here today and say we've made some bold decisions over the last 12 months. And they haven't been received positively by all of our community. In fact, they've created quite some reaction. And I could think of the establishment of the Māori ward, to which that did create quite a reaction. But if I asked you today, do you want to change your decision because that created a negative reaction from, and I have to say, from a portion of our community, I think your answer will be no, that actually you believe that was the right decision to make. And I'd like to think so. I'm not getting any nods around the table, which makes me slightly anxious. But I would, yes, thank you, Councillor O'Neill Stevens. Thank you. That actually we wouldn't want to change that decision. You moved through and you decided you wanted to take some actions to support modal shift. And yes, that created some reactions. You decided that you would endorse the Nelson Future Access Study proposal and send that to Waka Kotahi. And yes, there were people in the community that didn't agree with that and still would like the other options going through, and they're quite vocal about that. So there are a range of decisions that you've made that are big, long-standing decisions, that have taken, some of them, more than a decade to get there. You're in the process of decommissioning the modeller's pond. Those of you who have been here for a very long time, you'll recall all of those, and you can probably think of other decisions that have come through the year that are seeing some significant directional change, because as a council, that is what you decided you wanted to do in this triennium. And so you're following through on those decisions, and that will create a reaction. But I agree with Councillor Skinner that we've all said, actually, no, we're not happy with that result, and we want to take some positive actions to make sure that we are improving that result for the next year. But in saying that, it also doesn't mean that the decisions we've made are wrong. Decisions we've made have been really important and really well supported around this council table, not unanimously, but very strongly. Councillor Laurie, and then Councillor O'Neill-Stevens.
Thank you. The resident survey that matters will be held in October next year. For a start, I would like to move this. Has it been moved? Because I'd like to get a move on.
I just want to acknowledge that, just putting a noting in there, if we can, just to acknowledge that why we've got to the areas of improvement. I think we need to note that council wishes to lift the performance, the resident survey result, so we could put that in. Notes that council wishes to lift the resident survey results. That makes sense to you. And then notes the actions. I think that's the connection.
So,
Councillor Laurie.
Thanks. So I'd like to move, but I'd also like to do it in parts because I personally do not believe that Nelson City Council should be in the business of selling advertising. So I will vote against part 5, but I would like to be able to vote for the rest if that's okay.
Madam Mayor, I'll just indicate I've got an amendment to it.
What I'll do is, okay, I think we can do that, Councillor Laurie. That makes sense to me. So that's been moved by Councillor Laurie and you're happy with notes that we wish to lift the resident survey results? Yep. Okay, great. And Councillor Sanson's happy with that too. All right. And now I've got an amendment from Councillor Skinner. I just want to take a brief recess so that I can get that and work out whether we can address that in one go. So I'll just take a brief recess and come back. Right, look, that's taken a little bit of finessing, just to try and capture everybody's thoughts. So Robin's emailed through the clauses to Deputy Mayor. We're now displaying it on the screen. So we have a new clause in there that Councillor Skinner wishes to include. So we can see that one there, and he may wish to speak to that. So the mover and seconder may be prepared to introduce it. If not, we'll do it as an amendment. And then Councillor Egger has asked that in clause 5, there's a change. So it notes that there will be no progress on the introduction of advertising and our announcement until the results have come back. So basically that won't happen until, so we have to get the results back. All right, so that's a little bit different from what was there before. So the first thing is whether the mover and seconder are happy to include the third noting under 2.
That would be a
Is it
no for
2?
me.
Well, I'd like to just understand the intention behind it. So I'm
I'll
open
go
to
to
it.
Councillor Skinner.
Someone could just explain what it means.
I'll go to Councillor Skinner to speak to that.
Thank you. So much prompting like my questioning in regards to I felt we'd respond to the survey of trying to see how we could get better results rather than taking an ownership of decisions. And I think obviously we're not going to please everybody, and sometimes you have to obviously make bold decisions. But I think a lot of the public feedback is we've made decisions which haven't sat with the public, and some of those decisions the public have felt they haven't been through a good governance process. And on here it's also identifying that we've got to accept you're going to be all views, and sometimes that process or feedback for comms, etc., has got to acknowledge all views. I mean, we don't have to accept all views, but this is trying to preserve and protect democratic function and process, both for elected officials and the public. But I can see you can read into that in a number of ways, but it's recognising the diversity of views, and it's for us taking ownership of this survey. Pretty much what I spoke about in the commentary earlier in question time is that if we're worth our grain of salt, we would take ownership and see what we have to do differently, both in operations and in governance, to please the public that we are providing a service for.
So that's so the first thing at this stage, it's a procedural thing. So any further clarification questions from the mover or seconder?
So takes ownership of, just for clarification, I heard the survey results, but the words up there say ownership of decision making. So I'm just wondering, is the intention of that around the survey, or is the intention around something else, some other decision making?
Yes, the survey.
So then would you prefer it to read takes ownership of the survey results?
I agree with that.
You would agree with that?
Yeah.
All right, so
Only so it's really clear what's
okay.
So as the mover, I think council does that. Yeah. All the time. And I'm not a fan of just putting things in when you don't need to.
All right, so the answer is no then.
Yeah, it's no for me, but it can be put up as an amendment.
Yeah.
No, so I'm just trying, just for process, to try and move things along. So the answer is no, it won't be. So Councillor Skinner, if you want to pursue that, we'll need to do it as an amendment. Right.
Do it as an
And
amendment.
I'll second
Moved
that.
and seconded. Right. Thank you. And you, do you want to change the wording or leave it as it is? Just we'll do that.
I'd like to keep it simple, but if they think that makes it more understandable for the public and more not public for the councillors and acceptable to tie in with what we're discussing, I'd say yes. Yeah, thank you. But the throw the word was yeah, very good. Well done.
Look, councillors, I just wonder if when a councillor is speaking, if we couldn't have a chat and commentary going on at the same time, because it's really difficult for me to hear, and I can see others on the side of the table having difficulty too. So when someone's got the microphone, can I just ask that everyone else is not speaking? Thank you. Councillor Skinner.
Thank you to the governance advisors. Brilliant. So that it may take ownership of the survey results.
Right, thank you. Okay, all right, so that's the amendment. We'll deal with the amendment first. So everyone else is happy with everything else?
Sorry, I'm still waiting on my question.
Oh, I'm sorry, Councillor Neil Stevens, which were you? Oh, you were on the list, are you?
I was.
Oh, you are. Sorry, you are. We got so sidetracked on trying to sort this out. Councillor Neil Stevens, questions.
Thanks. Question for Kim, probably. when we're looking at our communications, who, in your mind, who is our audience?
Through the chair, I'm not sure if that's a trick question or not.
Not intended to be. I guess I'm wondering, do we have sort of specific, people? Are we looking for people who are engaged in council? Just generically, everyone who lives in Nelson? Are we looking at, maybe people who aren't actively engaged in council? Like when we're doing these comms, who are we targeting?
So we aim, through the chair, we aim as widely as possible. So while it is great that some people are engaged with council, I would suggest that we focus more on the people that aren't, because it's them that we want to reach with our policies and with our plans.
And so obviously within the report, there's discussion around some of the things that can be done to improve our traditional, print media. Is there any work being done or any thinking you've got around how we could improve our social media engagement?
So I think also within the report, there is a reference to improving our website. And I think that is a really important way to add to our online presence. So I guess when I look at social media, there are advantages of that and there are some disadvantages, which mean that I think that we need to look at other digital ways of reaching our audience as well. So I think the website is really key in that.
Great, thanks. And then just one for Pat, probably. If clause 5 were to be voted against, what would happen then? I'm trying to understand if there was a feeling from the table that actually we don't want to do advertising, we don't want to spend work developing an advertising policy if we don't think it's a good idea. If we voted against 5, would the idea be canned or would it just go ahead without coming back to council?
So the intention of 5 is that we're picking up on the message from the councils that don't like the advertising. So we didn't want to be doing any work on developing a policy or anything like that until we came back with the results of the survey. So voting for 5 is probably the best way to stop us wasting time doing something that's not going to get support.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, that's excellent. So we're now ready to go into debate, I think. We've got the amendment. Councillor Eager has got a question.
Yes, just one quick question. Sorry, I missed it earlier. Just on 4.17, 4.18, it talks about staff developing an explanatory diagram on the council decision-making process and engagement. Just wondering if council uses the International Association of Public Participation, the spectrum of public participation. A lot of councils around the country have that within their significance and engagement policies and sort of matches, levels of significance with engagement, if that's what they were thinking of doing.
Through the chair, this is slightly more of a question for our engagement manager, but I will follow up with him to ensure that we are.
Thank you.
Do you know if we do already?
Through the chair, look, that's one of the models that we are aware of and look to when we're considering engagement. It's not specifically built into our significance and engagement policy.
All right, so I think that might be worth considering. So as we come through this process, because we're communications and engagement, different, but part of a collective. So obviously we haven't got the engagement manager here today. All right, so now we're going into a debate on the amendment. So Councillor Skinner, do you wish to speak to the amendment?
No, I won't add any more. I think
Okay,
I've explained it well.
All right, any other speakers? Councillor Brand, then Councillor Laurie, and then Councillor Rainey.
Thank you, through the chair. The reason why I'm supporting this part of the amendment is because I hear it a lot that that the council has a level of the public feel that the council takes their feedback as tokenism or apathy towards it, and they feel that the council is not interested in hearing if they don't agree with the things that are put out. So I feel that by this going in there, and we can see from some of the feedback within the resident survey, we're asking people what's good, what's bad, and what's ugly. And if we ignore the ugly and just look at what's good and what's bad and do nothing, then all we are doing is reinforcing the view that the community has that their ability to feed back into or engage, you may as well keep it on the level of tokenism and apathy. And I don't want to be part of that. And I feel by putting this into this recommendation around the resident survey, it's sort of saying we're looking at things differently. It's saying your voice is important. We do want to hear, and if we're not meeting your expectations, then do tell us so that we can review that and think about it in a considered manner, so that what would hopefully happen is that the wider community will feel, oh, they are taking notice, they are listening, therefore I will engage more with our council, and hearing the different things that we have to get that feedback. We'll look for ways to improvement with the Qualmark standard performance review. We're looking at updating our website. We just heard that, also about tying that in with the social media and stuff. I feel there's different ways that we can capture that, but I feel this is saying we will acknowledge, accept and take ownership of the ugly as well as the good and the bad, and not censor our public from feeding back in, and that reinforces that. So that's why I'm in support of it.
And I'll ask for a division on that amendment, please.
Councillor Laurie.
So I don't think council does censor the people of Nelson, and what I hear is, it's reasonably persuasive. I mean, it's hard to disagree with the arguments that I've just heard. But the problem I have with it is if we think that we need to put this into the recommendation, then we're saying that council doesn't recognise a diversity of views and doesn't take ownership of the survey results. And I think we do. We always do. And I think including this as, and I understand why it would be an attractive thing to do, but I think it undermines that. So for me, council does recognise a diversity of views. We all do. We have to do it every week in this gig. And I think we take ownership of the results. We're putting them out there. We're going to get a lot of feedback on them. And like I said, the survey that really counts will be held next year. So, I mean, I don't think it adds to taking us forward.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Rainey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll be voting against this amendment. And I think that some of the members around this table who quite often claim that they hear from the wider community, or they hear from the community, or they hear from the public, need to be reminded that they only hear from some of the public, some of the community, not all of the community. I absolutely question what the rationale for putting this up is actually. Why would we not want to lift the results? Why do we need to put that in there? Would we ever contemplate?
Councillor Rainey, we're not speaking to that one. We're speaking to the third one. So that's the amendment. The other ones were accepted by the mover and the seconder.
To lift the resident survey?
Yes.
Okay, I apologise. Got the wrong end of the stuff.
Okay, so it's recognises a diversity of views and takes ownership of the survey results is the amendment.
So hang on, which one?
The amendment notes that council recognises a diversity of views and takes ownership of the survey results.
Okay, then I do want to speak to that. I agree with Councillor Laurie. Council already does this. We do not need to put this in. It's something that council already does, and I absolutely do not think we need to state this.
I'm just going to speak. Oh, Councillor Noonan wishes to speak, and then I'll.
Thank you. I wasn't going to, but I just would like to say that I will support it, because even if it is restating what we already do, I'll be voting for it on that basis. Thank you.
And I'm going to support it as well, because I think when you do you go out and you ask for feedback on how you're going, that actually it's important to, affirm that actually the views of the community are important. And I I don't accept that the only performance review that we do, or the most important, that the one that counts is once every 3 years for an election. I actually think we have a responsibility to be far more responsive than once every 3 years. And that's a continuous process. It's every week, it's every day. Now, I'm constantly engaging with the community on a range of issues where they'll want changes, they're not satisfied. I learn things about how we could improve our performance on a very, very regular basis, as do the officers. There are things that where we have unintended consequences. We want to know about those and we want to fix those. And I think it's really important that we are responsive. So I'd struggle to vote against that. It seems to me reflective of what is good governance. It's not good governance to suggest that the only review we'll do is once every 3 years to look at our performance.
Point of order. No one suggested that we only do it every 3 years.
I'm just saying my view, as a matter of fact, is I don't think it is appropriate to consider that once every 3 years. I think it's more than that, and so I think that's important. Right, which division's been called for?
So, for the avoidance of doubt, you are voting on notes that council recognises a diversity of views and takes ownership of the survey results. Councillor Noonan.
Aye.
Councillor McGurk.
Aye.
Councillor O'Neill Stevens.
Aye.
Councillor Sanson.
Aye.
Councillor Edgar.
Aye.
Councillor Laurie.
You won me over. Aye.
Councillor Brand.
Aye.
Councillor Bowater.
Aye.
Councillor Courtney and Councillor Fulton, apologies. Councillor Rainey.
No.
Councillor Skinner.
Aye.
Madam Mayor.
Aye. So the amendment is carried. 9 votes in favour and 2 opposed to the amendment. Right, moving on to the sorry.
Did I make a mistake? You said not me, did you not?
I don't think that is correct, Mr. Chief Executive, because I think Councillor O'Neill Stevens voted affirmatively. Yes, that isn't correct.
Oh, I'm sorry. My apologies.
No, so let's just adjust it. The only. So no.
That was a pre-filled in form you pulled out. That was one.
Just like to note that I don't think it's reasonable, councillors, to suggest that the Chief Executive has the form pre-filled out on what he thinks you're going to vote. So I will note that the outcome of the division is we have that Councillor O'Neill Stevens supported it, Councillor Rainey did not. We've clarified that 10 votes in favour, 1 opposed and 2 apologies, and that adds up to 13. So I think we're okay. Right, moving on. Now that becomes part of the substantive motion. So speaking to the substantive motion, do I have any speakers in relation to what's there? And we're going to take this, we've been asked to be taken in parts, so part 5 will be taken separately. Right, speaking to the motion, Councillor. Well, you'll need to withdraw the request to take it in parts if you wish to. You'd like to withdraw the request to take it in parts?
Because we've just had
Is the Secretary happy with that withdrawal as well?
Absolutely.
Thank you. That would be really helpful. Okay, here we go. Speaking to the motion. Councillor Laurie.
Thanks. So, yeah, I mean, the result is food for thought, and everyone, I think, will be thinking about it over the Christmas summer break, and I'm sure we'll get plenty of feedback on it as well. I moved it because I wanted us to keep moving because it's now 25 minutes past 10 and we've got a lot of work to get through. But I do want to say one thing about our Nelson, and that is that, I think the problem with our Nelson, the challenge for our Nelson is it's all about council stuff. And lots of people in Nelson, unbelievably, aren't that interested in council stuff. And I think that's the challenge for it. Personally, I'd like to see our Nelson evolve into something that wasn't just about council stuff. So there'll be more faces and more stories and more things of interest to get people to read the council stuff. And I think that's where the future lies for that publication. That's my personal view. But it's a view that's informed from almost 20 years of working in the media. I think the idea of us getting our social media is a terrible idea. I think that if we were to do that, then a very large percentage of our population would be cut off from the information that we are trying to deliver to them. So I really don't like that idea at all. I also think the fact that only 43% of Nelsonians are satisfied or highly satisfied with council service suggests that a lot of the other people aren't going to pick up our Nelson anytime soon. And I actually, and I'm sorry, I'm going across what I just said before, but I, as I said earlier in the meeting, I don't think council's business is selling advertising. So I will be against part 5. I don't think doing some research is a good idea, because I just think in the end the answer should be no, we shouldn't be doing that. It's not our role. It's potentially got fish hooks. I just don't think it's worth it. And I really don't think that one of the reasons we should do it is because Tasman does it. You know, they've got a different community. They do things their way. I see some real problems with it, so I won't support that part of it. But otherwise, let's move on.
Thank you, Councillor O'Neill-Stevens.
Thanks, Madam Mayor, and I'll echo and support much of what Councillor Laurie's has said. I think there's an inevitability that there will be disagreement and controversy over some of the decisions that happen at this table, and I don't think we should lose sleep over that. I think what's more telling in the results is that actually there's a feeling that we do need to be doing better at communicating those decisions and at engaging with Nelsonians. One of the things that's so crucial in engagement is actually engaging in ways that people want to be engaged with. So I don't know a huge number of people who willingly pick up our Nelson and spend 30 minutes paging through there. I know plenty of people who scroll Facebook for a lot longer than they should, including in meetings. And so we need to be where people are, but more importantly than that, we need to engage in ways that people want to be engaged with. And I think something that's really crucial is bringing the personal into that. All of our decisions are inherently personal. They will personally affect people. And so when we go out and engage or share our message by saying, we've made this decision, that's that, the personal aspect is lost and it pushes people away. We need to be going out there and telling our story naturally and honestly. And sometimes that's not a perfectly written press release. I think also that comes through into when people come in to engage with us, actually putting a name to the person who's responding, to giving people a sense of who council is, that it's not this, brutalist organisation lurking in a tall building and never seeing the light of day. It's made up of people in the community doing things. And when we can start to finally express that, then we'll be on a path towards genuine engagement. I do just want to touch on the advertising. No, I don't support advertising in our Nelson. I think that is only going to dilute the information that we're putting out. But I will be supporting number 5 because I think it is important that we undertake that survey and understand what our communication reach currently looks like and how we could potentially grow that. And number 5 is simply saying that until that's done, absolutely nothing's going to happen on that advertising front. So I will be supporting that.
I'm going to speak in support of what is here and say I think those community stories are absolutely critical too, because we are a community organisation, and I really support the comments from Councillor Laurie and Councillor O'Neill-Stevens. I can just think of this week I've been up to the parade for the Nelson Cadet Unit, and one of the most beautiful young leadership stories was told there. I'm trying to get that captured because we've got it's just a wonderful story, and I'm really hoping the communications team can pick that up because it's just really special. So those are the sorts of things, and those of us we're in the community a lot, connecting with people. We know we have got great reach to bring back to tell those stories, and I'd love to see more of them. The Nelson City Council's Facebook page has got reasonable following, but I think we could be doing so much more on social media. So I'm not a supporter of dialing that back. If you're going to have it, you've got to be all in. going absolutely all in, and I'd love to see us doing more Facebook Live. You know, the things that, it's amazing, you know, when you do those like things that take 5 minutes, like the little chat that I did with my mum over vaccination, you know, a while back that went up there, I got amazing response across the, you know, across the country and across the community of people just saying they're not necessarily going to respond to the Facebook page, but they'll pick it up. And having the stories of what you're involved with as councillors, talking about that is important. So I think in terms of our communicating what we do in our decisions, and Councillor Neil Stevens has talked about this before, doing a bit of a wrap after the, you know, the meetings of actually, okay, this is what we did today. Look, to be honest, if you know, from a time poor mayor, I have to say that would be, and from time poor chairs or those of us, that would be a really great opportunity to be able to get those messages out and really think about what we're doing. So, you know, I think it's work in progress, and I'd really like to see us sort of making that you know, see that moving through for next year. I think in terms of the steps you're proposing there, I'm happy to support clause 5, but equally I'm not supportive of advertising in our Nelson. I just, but I've got a bigger question that's about whether our Nelson is actually delivering a value for money result in terms of actually engaging with the public and making sure that the why of what we're doing is actually understood and valued. Even if people disagree with us, and they will, it's great, you know, people, as long as if they can understand what you did, they don't have to agree with you, but they actually feel, you know, appreciate the fact that you've talked them through actually what your reasons were for what you did. So, you know, it's a bit more of that stuff that we'll need to see, I think we're going to need to see. But that survey results tells us something, you know, and I do think we need to focus on lifting it, and I do think we need to acknowledge that the views that have been given through that survey. Councillor Noonan, and then I'll just look to probably get to put the motion.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Look, really interesting hearing the debate. I would like to see stories about how our decisions affect people. So focus on the person and what that decision has done in their life, because I think they're probably sick of seeing us. They're probably sick of seeing the norm, but actually what we do here affects everyday life. So it would be really good to see the stories coming from those affected. And it would also be really good to see stories about the people that we partner with and seeing it from their point of view and how we've been able to help them. Because I think a lot of the stuff that comes out is negative, and actually there's a whole lot of stuff that happens that's positive that we never hear about. And I think it would be really, I'm really looking forward to undertaking what we're looking at here today and working with our comms team and create something really different, but from the other angle, not from our angle, but from the other angle. So I'm supportive of what we've done today, and thank you for working. There's quite a lot of work in there to get those extra clauses in, so thank you for that.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to put the motion. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. All right, let's take a morning tea break for maybe back at 1:45, 10 minutes if we could. I don't mind if you want to bring your morning tea back to the table. Next item on our agenda is the schedule of meetings for 2022. Debbie's here. Oh, Debbie, hello. You are here. Kia ora. Pages 208 through 210. Debbie, I'll hand over to you because you've got a few introductory comments, I think, so we can get this done reasonably quickly. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And through the Mayor, yes, I do have some quick updates to make to what you will have seen with the circulation of the agenda, primarily focused around workshops, but I'll just briefly touch on the points with your leave. Since the agenda was released, we have had a couple of the meetings in relation to liaison roles, the dates received, so we'll be adding those in. Saxton Field Committee dates have since been negotiated with Tasman District Council. I do just need to note that those will shift to a Friday as the Wednesdays didn't work with other councils' business, so just raising that. And we are continuing to liaise closely with Tasman District Council again in relation to the future development strategy project timeline and meetings and workshops in relation to that particular piece of work. More generally, we will be adjusting the schedule so that there's no workshop time from about 3 months before the election, so that sort of pre-election period. There is one exception to that general principle, which will be a workshop which has already been agreed with Tasman for the 12th of July, and that's because it's in relation to the future development strategy work, which I've just touched on. And another quick point, I suppose, the default, we've done our best again to stay away from Wednesdays as much as we can as far as workshop time is concerned. You will see that there is the occasional time held on a Wednesday there, and that's just how it's played out in terms of project timing and other work that's on or anticipated to come through in that week or month. So we have done our absolute best to keep those as rare as possible for you. And again, as usual, to work in as closely around school holidays and staying away from those in terms of meetings and gatherings as far as possible. I think that's everything. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
And Nikki, did you want to speak to the annual plan as well?
Oh, yes, sorry.
That was the other part with Debbie.
Yes, sorry, that is a point that I'd forgotten to cover. So the annual plan hearings and time set aside specifically for that will be removed.
All right, so those ones, so this is a starter, so we'll adopt it as the, how we do that? Noting, we need to do a noting that there are proposed changes or something along, or as a, how can we do it? We'll include a list of the changes in the minutes. All right, so we adopt the schedule of meetings. Because I can't do it as amended because it's going to take too long to go through and do it. What do we think? As amended, and then we'll note it. That's brilliant. So as amended, so noting, brilliant. You've got it all in the minutes. Oh, you've got it.
Happy to move that.
Moved by Councillor Neil Stevens. Thank you. I will second that. Councillor Noonan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I mean, I wrote an email about it with 16 dates, so I've got no. Have we got a redraft of what's been removed, or
no, we don't, and we're not going to try and stop today and do that. What we've done is verbally capture the matters that can be addressed, noting that we have to have something to get started, but there are some changes that have been noted today.
So given some of these are in February, can we have a redraft of particularly maybe January, February, March, just as soon as possible so that we can make our own appointments around that?
Let's go to Robin. Thank you. Oh, sorry, Robin.
Through the chair, once the calendar is adopted, Ruth will be sending out your meeting requests over the next week.
Okay, so what I use is I keep that for the whole year. So can we have a redraft of that at some stage? But the first, Ruth will send the first few months out fairly quickly. So at some point, the whole thing
we'll say possibly.
Oh, it doesn't have to be immediate, but just as some time. Yeah. Thanks.
Councillor Eager.
Yes, sorry, I didn't quite catch the comment about future development strategy because we did ask, I think it was yesterday, maybe, about whether the future development strategy dates had been fed into the process. So are you saying there are additional ones to go in here?
Thank you, and through the Mayor. No, we have been working closely with the teams, both at our end and with Tasman District Council on the project timeline. There have been some shifts between the two different councils that we just need to iron out and make sure that everybody has got exactly the same dates set. But they're not additional, it's just working out exactly when they're going to sit.
Okay, and then just in relation to Saxton Field, I'm just noting there's been no discussion with, no discussion with myself about it changing days. And, Friday is not a day we necessarily set aside for meetings, and I do have other commitments and meetings that I've already got scheduled. So I think if we're changing days altogether, because I had Wednesdays set aside for Saxton Field and other things. If we're changing to a totally different day that we don't necessarily have set aside, then I think it's prudent to talk to the two councillors on that subcommittee to make sure we can actually make those meetings before they're set.
Yes, I would think so. Who's the other representative? Councillor Skinner. Councillor Skinner, is it you had engagement in relation to change of days?
No, but I'm available.
All right, so what's provoked the change, Debbie? Is it Tasman District Council?
Yeah, I understand that the conversation was had between Nelson and Tasman District Councils and with the chair of the committee, and there was a clash around dates in terms of days. I can give you the proposed dates. I do have those in front of me if that would be useful to you now.
Well, I think you're going to sort that out with Councillor Ego and make that work. I mean, it's very tricky if we're because what it may mean is that we're going to have to change the membership because it's just impossible if there's commitments that are made.
We'll follow up as quickly as possible on that one, Councillor Edgar, for you.
Thank you.
Okay, so discussion was with the Saxton Field Committee Chair. Right. Thank you. Okay, no further questions. It's been moved and seconded. I'm going to put the motion. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. Now, the next item I was going to go to was the approval of submission for the emissions reduction plan. But if we can do the climate change oversight governance group in 30 seconds, then I'll do that one. No one's got any changes. Moved by Councillor Neil Stevens. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor McGurk. No questions? Oh, there are questions? No questions? Councillor Sampson.
Thanks. I'll just pull my questions up. I've just noted in my agenda that I did have questions, so let me just pull them up and see if I'm comfortable with them. So I did send my questions through, and page 2146, it says powers to recommend the phrase reporting back on issues. I just questioned whether we wouldn't be, whether the group wouldn't be reporting back on everything rather than just issues. So a suggestion was made that maybe it's, could say reporting back on matters.
Go to Ms McDonald.
Yes, I have no problem with matters.
All right, so mover and seconder is happy with that, changing to matters on page, which page?
214, item 6.
Item 6, fantastic, good idea.
And then the next question was page 215, item 9, the role of staff. This section refers to the preparation of agendas and recording key points from this discussion. So I wanted to know if this will be available to all elected members. And that then, but there's a subsequent question, because they kind of seem to offset each other on page 215, the final paragraph. Says something about there not being kind of formal agendas and minutes kept. And so then I wanted to know, how many governance groups does council have that operate in this way? And what are they? And do these same exclusions apply to all of these groups? Yes, I sent them all through.
Through the chair, I might just answer the matters that relate to this item.
Yes, certainly.
We would not proposing to circulate the notes. In fact, they're fairly, the agenda and the notes are just to help the members of the group to focus on what to discuss and then to recall what was said. It was anything that then needed to flow further on could come in a report from staff to the committee, could be in the chair's report, might turn up as a paragraph or two in the quarterly report. So there's already mechanisms for the wider group to know what's necessary that comes out of there. And this is, as you say, very standard wording around the Meetings Act. They're not notified to the public. We don't have public attending. That's the level of the group.
Thanks, Nikki. And the number we have, just while we're here, just for efficiency.
Excuse me, I'll just have to look up the answer.
I've got the answer. Okay.
Yeah.
So there's 5 existing, and I think this will make it 6. And then I think why I was curious as to whether there is any standardization is because when I look at some of them, like for example, the iwi Council Partnership Group, agendas are prepared and minutes taken, and those are uploaded to SharePoint. So all elected members do have visibility across that. But then some of the other ones, City Centre Engagement Group, City for All Ages Working Group, Central Library Governance Reference Group, which hasn't started yet. And then I guess this one, the Climate Change Oversight Governance Group, it's just kind of still a little bit grey as to whether all elected members are going to have an opportunity to, be able to reference what the agenda was or any recorded notes.
To the chair, this is more of a support for staff group to help the work move through. So it's not something where we would want to even bother the rest of members with a whole lot of notes and so on. Anything that needs to flow up to the committee will come through one of those channels that I talked about.
Okay.
So it's about the hierarchy of these different groups that meet.
Yeah, we get. Yeah,
that's great. Fine. Thanks.
And I'm sure the
clarification.
I'm absolutely sure the members of the group, if they feel there's something that they want to really, that they need to get a wider range of views on, they'll make sure they do that. I've got trust and confidence in the team. Okay, it's been moved and seconded. I'm going to put the motion. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. Sorry. That was a. I'll do that again. All those in favour?
Aye.
Aye. Against?
No.
Okay, it's carried on voices. Right. Then we're on to the next item, which is the page 216, the approval of the submission on the governance emission reduction plan.
I'm just.
I'll go to just invite Daniela to join the meeting. Kia ora, Daniela. Thank you. Welcome to the meeting. Are there any corrections or additions that you want to make to your report or the attachment? No. Thank you very much. Okay, thank you. So we'll open for questions. Any questions for Daniela? No questions? Councillor O'Neill-Stevens?
Yeah, kia ora, Daniela. I was just wondering if you could outline, I guess, the engagement process that has happened with elected members in the development of this.
Sure, through the chair. I follow the PROMAP process in internet. So that's understanding if we're going to put a submission and finding alternative ways to writing a standalone submission. So I went through that and we decided that the best option was supporting the LG and set and Taitoara submissions. And so after that, we identified different staff members in different departments, and I sent the LG and set submission, and they provided feedback that they thought that was different on the one that raised something different that was included in the LG and set submission. So after that, the document was peer review, and it was also approved by SLT. And then the submission was sent to Mayor and Councillor Fulton on the 12th of November to give a maximum time for governance to provide feedback. I didn't get any feedback, so the submission was submitted on the 24th of November, which was the deadline.
So in this case, the SLT hadn't completed their review, and so I waited for that, and then I hadn't had that, and I just couldn't turn that round in the time frame of sort of an overnight. So I was simple. There's no point in me trying to do that at that sort of time frame. Otherwise, I'm reviewing things multiple times. Any further questions? Councillor Simpson and then Councillor McGurk and then Councillor Brand.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So mine is not a question for Daniela, it's more a process question. I signalled yesterday when you were running through the items that I would possibly have an amendment. And so when would you like me to talk about that? Shall I wait till Daniela's stepped away?
I think this is the issue in relation to buses, public transport. Is that the issue?
Yeah, so
I'll get you some, so I think there's some procedural matters and you talked yesterday about standing orders.
Yes.
I think that's one.
Yep.
So I've checked in what the issue is with standing orders. In order to have that conversation at all, there would need to be, I think I've got this right, we'd need to suspend standing orders that decision's already been made. That will require, Elaine, have I got this right, 75% of the members present, and that will be how many, just so we work that out. We can always 1, 2, 8. That will require 8 members to allow that to happen. So that would be the first thing. So this is the discussion.
Can I ask that of the members? Is that possible?
Well, as chair, I will. Well, what you'll be asking is to suspend standing orders because this has already been debated and decided, and so that decision's been made. So Councillor Neil Stevens is moving that we suspend standing orders to allow that to happen. Is that what you're doing?
Sure.
Okay, and you'll second that, Councillor Sansom?
Yes.
All right, then the question for the members are you prepared to set aside standing orders to allow a matter that has already been decided, I hope I got the wording right, Chief Executive, has already been decided by Council last week before, a couple of weeks ago, to allow it to be re-debated here. So do you understand what we're doing? Okay.
I'm happy to speak.
No, there's no speaking to it.
Seconds,
There's no speaking to it. It's procedural matters. So if you're prepared to suspend standing orders to do a re-debate, please or take the all those in favour?
Aye.
Those against?
No.
No. Just I didn't quite catch that in terms of
Hands, please.
So I'm just going to sort out what we're going to do. So I need to be able to
Request
see
a
what we're
division.
doing. So we're going to work through this because I need to just get Councillor Edgar on screen. So I'm going to ask you, we're going to do raising hands. So I just need you to raise your physical hand if you could so I can see you. All those in favour of suspending standing orders? 1, 2, 3. Those opposed? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It's lost. Right, moving on. Any other questions for Daniela in relation to the submission? Councillor McGurk.
Just thank you, and through you, Madam Mayor, and to Danielle, thank you very much. Very comprehensive report. Really appreciate it. Just checking in that that it's in sync with some other submissions that were put in. I'm thinking of taking responsibility for our waste submission. I see there's some synergies there, but if you've checked that they are in sync and there's no conflicts.
Through the chair, I've discussed with a staff member for waste and I provided comments for the waste submissions and she provided comments for this emission reduction plan submission. So yes.
Thank you.
Right, Councillor Brand.
Thank you. It sort of ties in with that a little bit. Just on page 223, under the behavioural change number 44, it says strongly supports the establishment of a behavioural change fund, and then it sort of ties into the minimum waste and all of that. What does that actually mean for council if that was to happen?
Through the chair, sorry, I can't remember the way that I've produced the submission is collecting feedback from different staff. So I didn't write personally this feedback. I can come back to you on the author of this feedback and provide further information.
Yeah, that'd be good because I just wanted to understand what a behavioural change fund is, if it was sort of already funded and if it's just pulling that together or if it was across those different things, as Councillor McGurk already mentioned about the waste minimisation and the transport stuff as well. So I just wanted to get clear on what that was and where it comes from and how
Any follow-up? No? Are you clear on the answer, Councillor Brand? No. Okay, so we might need just to go through that again. I don't think Councillor Brand's quite got the answer that she's looking for.
Sorry, she said she was going to go back to the report person who wrote that part of the report. But if we're making decisions here, I'm just sort of a little bit
Lost
on what I should be doing on that.
Okay. Ms. McDonald.
So if the meeting would mind if we move on to the next item, then Daniela can go and check who that person is and they can come and comment on the National Behaviour Change Fund.
Okay. All right, so you want us to put that to one side? We'll come back to it later. So any further questions? Councillor Skinner.
Thank you for that. And just of a definition on the 39, page 222, 39, about how New Zealand can grow frontier firms. What's a frontier firm?
Through the chair, I will also check with the author of that feedback. Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll come back to that one. Anything else? All right, so we'll just leave that one there for the moment. And just to round out Councillor O'Neill-Stevens' question around the process, this one is signed by the Chief Executive, and I'm just referring back to my notes that this one went through a process of, this was a broad range of staff had input into this, producing this submission, and it went through, I'd read the early draft, and then I can see that I didn't have the document post SLT review by the 24th, which was sign-off date. So I fed back to say, so I don't know if there's been changes, but I felt that in this instance, the document's been informed in the main and by input from many staff teams, which is really good. Also been through the SLT process, which is great, SLT process, and therefore it's appropriate in that case that the Chief Executive signs off the submission. If it had been through a governance process, then I would sign it off. But in order to sign it off, given the cross-council nature of the submission, then I would have needed to have a number of chairs look at the content to be able to get it signed off. So my sense was that given it had been through a robust all of council process at a staff level, the appropriate thing was for the officers to sign it off. So that's the sort of approach that I try and take where I feel it's in that situation. It was very time bound, so it's important that we did get it in. So we'll come back to it a bit later on with the answer to those questions. So that one just lie on the table for the moment, and then we'll deal with that one. All right, next up, what's the time now? 1:15. Let's have a go at the Nelson Arts Strategy Establishment of Working Group paper. It is on, sorry, Gareth, welcome back. Page 274 of your agenda. Gareth, any corrections or additions to the report?
No, and I haven't received any questions.
No questions on this one? Well, it should be quite quick then. Righty-ho, any questions for Gareth? Councillor Noonan.
This one, sorry, I didn't get the whole lot read, I'd have to say, and I had to leave this one. My only question is that it's reporting back to council instead of reporting back to community and recreation. I just wondered why.
Through the chair, the funding that we received from Creative New Zealand was an economic grant in response to COVID, and both of those delegations remain with council. So it's cross committee.
Thank you. No other questions?
To move it.
It's been moved by Councillor Noonan. Do I have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Bowater. Thank you. Any debate? Councillor Noonan.
I'd just like to say good luck to them. I wish them all the best in creating this strategy because it's something that we've been wanting. So thank you.
Yes, I'd agree. It's a really important piece of work, and I think as Councillor Rainey noted yesterday, that then the output from this piece of work will need to feed into future annual plans. I'm going to put it. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. All right, now we're on to, I want to come to the What have we got left to do? Got the forestry AMP still to do. What else could I, and I think we've got that for 11:30, is that right, Mr. Lavertis? So we've got that timetable for 11:30 because we've got the advisors here for that one coming in. What could we do next? Event strategy, that's a good idea. Let's do the events strategy. And are we ready for the annual report? Probably, we're not sure about that. Officers, can you just let me know if you're ready for the annual report? A thumbs up or something would be good. Miss McDonald and Miss Harrison,
Ready.
are you ready for the annual report or not? No, not yet. Okay.
Chair, we told John Mackey it would be around 4 o'clock.
Around 4 o'clock. Okay, that's fine. So we'll do the events strategy implementation update report, pages 282 of your agenda. Did anyone have any questions for the officer?
I'm happy to move that.
Moved. Okay, moved by Councillor Neil Stevens, seconded by Councillor Brand. Any debate on this one? This is an update report, and I think the procedural is just in terms of the reporting sequence from memory. Oh, Councillor Edgar has got questions.
Well, I sent 3 questions in regards to the diagram on page 283, and I believe there's an updated version to be tabled.
There is, and it has been. Yes.
Right. Okay, thank you, because it just, it had some events such as, Fringe Festival and Isle Market saying that they were delivered by NRDA and our events team, which is incorrect. And so, there's just a few changes in that diagram that are actually probably quite important to those event organisers that are correct in council documents. Thank you.
Excellent. Okay, so that's all sorted. Any other questions? It's been moved and seconded. In that case, I will put the motion. All those in favour? Aye, against, carried. Guys. Great. Okay, so that's good. And then we might do just we wait till 11:30. We might start on that's all of those ones, isn't it? Gosh, we're doing well, aren't we? No, you've got that's positive affirmation. Doing really well, team. We need to let's start the annual report questions. I think we could do those, couldn't we? Any questions on the annual report? So the annual report document is in your agenda on page 182. So if we get all the questions out of the way now. 182. Any questions relating to the annual report? It can't be 182. Wait, 189. That's me. But 189. That was probably me, team, not my notes. Okay. It is 189. No, it is 189. Right. Any questions on the annual report? Any questions? Oh, Councillor Riga.
Sorry, just double checking that Laura Bruce had started creating a spreadsheet or a table of questions and staff responses and changes made to text. Is that being tabled?
Through the chair, yes, there was a document tabled yesterday that included those comments that you're referring to, the changes.
So I don't feel I need to ask any of my questions because I was happy with the responses provided in that document. Thank you.
Excellent. Anyone else got any questions? All right. Do we need Mr. Mackey? I'm not diminishing his very high importance, but
yes, I'm being advised we do need to hear from him later, if that's all right.
Can I? It's written me a very nice letter. I could read it out. So
there is one other matter, if I can. Sorry, through an oversight, the forward was not included in the document, so we're just printing that off. We'll give it to elected members before lunch. It's 2 sides of an A4, so I'm very sorry about that. But if you could make sure that that is,
we might just wait till the Mayor and Chief Executives had a chance to give our feedback on the forward. Is that the Mayor and Chief Executives forward?
I'm sorry, I thought that it had happened. I've obviously misunderstood.
Oh, no, not yet. No, we've been a bit busy.
No, I provided some feedback this morning, but no, the mayor hasn't seen it yet. So
I've seen it, but I waited for the chief executive to make changes. I don't like him to do things 3 times, so wait till everyone else has done their bit, and then hopefully there's nothing left for me to do. So it's usually the approach. Okay, so hopefully it won't take us very long. So I wouldn't print it yet till I've just had a final read of the version. That'd be great. Okay. And that case, that one's there. And so, Alaka, are we good? Do we have people joining us for the Forestry Advisory? AMP, you've got your, or not? Will we take a quick 5-10 minute break again?
Yeah, through the chair, they said that they would be ready at past if we needed them. Yeah.
Right, okay. So we'll take any other items, Robin, that I could deal with in Elaine right now. I would have to go into public excluded, wouldn't we? And we've got visitors coming, I think, for all of those items. Okay. All right, well, we'll just go and take a 10-minute break. I'll go and read the forward to the annual report and we'll come back. Then it'll be done. Kia ora tātou, thank you. That was actually a very useful little break. So we've tidied up the forward for the annual report. So that's going to be all ready for you. So that was, thank you very much for that. And we have also just been working on one of the matters that we left to lie in public excluded yesterday around the housing reserve, and worked on some resolutions that we needed to work on overnight. So they should be all ready to go when we get to public excluded. So I think I am correct, Elaine Robert, that the last one we have to deal with in public today is, apart from the annual report, which will be at 4, is and the NRDA. So that's a go into public excluded, and then we're going, the emissions reduction report's got to come back. So no one's come back about that one yet. No, okay. And then the Forestry Advisory Group's recommendation to council on the activity management plan is next up. And that is at the front of your agenda. On pages, where is it? Oh, it's after this one. It's on page 6. Okay, so recommendation to adopt the revised forestry activity management plan, which is page 6 because it's a recommendation from committee. So there is the recommendation to come through. If there are any questions in relation to this, then I have the chair of the committee here, and the advisors to the committee are on Zoom. If we need to let them in, I'm not sure if we do at this point. So questions, Councillor Sanson.
I'm just signalling that I have got an amendment that I would like to put up. And I'm just going to, I've got a slightly updated wording on that, which I'm just going to forward to the governance advisors now. Would that be easy? Is that the best way?
They'll need it if you, but we will just have to take some advice on what you've put through. I think you've already had the advice from the chief executive.
Sure, but I've
meeting,
amended it so that it's
okay in the public
it's
meeting.
Hopefully going to cover off the concern. So I've just I'll just send it to the governance advisors now. So it's basically just the change is on item 2. Just says
what I might do, Councillor Sanson, is just wait till we've got it so people can see it. Is that all right? I'll just give Elaine a moment. Just waiting to receive it. So we'll just get it through.
Yeah, I've sent it.
Okay.
I want to move the amendment.
And I'll second it.
But it won't be an amendment because no one's moved a substantive motion at this point.
So I'd like to move it as a substantive motion. Thanks.
And I'll second that.
So we might just have some procedural issues around doing that, but we'll just wait and see what we're getting. Chief, has you had a chance to look at this yet or not? No.
The only changes to item 2 where it says directs the forestry subcommittee, just in response to concerns about procedural matters. We felt that would cover those off.
All right, so just take some advice from the chief executive.
So you'll appreciate I've seen this for 7 seconds.
We can take a brief adjournment, so you've got some time if you like.
Yes, I
would like that.
I would, if I could get a printed copy of that, I wouldn't mind considering that.
Okay, thank you.
So I did send the entire amendment through first thing this morning. So the only change is that it directs the forestry subcommittee. That's the only difference. So it's only a 3-word difference.
It's all right, but I think it's in fairness to the chief executive and the officers, given it's a substantive piece of work in an asset and activity management plan, they should have that opportunity.
So perhaps I can
make fairness to have a look, definitely, because like myself, I get up in the morning, you get ready, kids to school, you're not reading stuff. Night before is good, you can read stuff the night before. I'll stay up late till 1 in the morning, read stuff, but things come in the morning, don't expect them to be read by myself until I've got.
No, that's fine. Sorry, I was working with the mayor and the deputy mayor on the recommendation, and I just didn't get it through. Didn't get the information I needed until this morning.
No, so I saw it for the actual amendment this morning for the first time as well.
Yeah.
Pause. Going to take a brief pause. Okay, that's all right. Kia ora tātou. We're just coming back to complete the emissions reduction submission. Daniela's got the answers to the two questions. Daniela, I'll hand over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Through the chair, answering the question, what is a frontier firm? This is a term used by the Productivity Commission reports that define frontier firms as among the most productive firms in the economy within their industry. And I have a link to share with you with the further definition of that. So, and that was part of the question too. So the question 39 also includes that term. How can Aotearoa grow frontier firms?
Sorry, so firms that are leading in economic growth return.
Yes, and then
profitable.
Yeah, that's
Not
right.
necessarily technologically, but profitable.
Is I can read all the definition, but it's like 6 paragraphs, 7 paragraphs. I will send you the link.
Thank you.
And the second question was Councillor Trudy about the behaviour change. So this point supports a recommendation by LG and SET. They have already said that provided that feedback, and that supports the establishment of a national behavioural change fund available to local government to build on local expertise and programs already underway. So this, I got this from the officer. To be successful, emission reduction fundamentally requires a commitment from people and organizations to change behaviors. Key successful change is developing whole community understanding and commitment to new behaviors which will reduce emissions.
Thank you.
Thank you. So just to clarify, so with it being a national fund, do we have to then like set aside money to them, or are they getting that from the central or their own funding? And then we would have to apply as independent councils to access that behavioural change fund with certain criteria?
I understand that, yes. That's
okay, sweet. Thank you.
Right, no further questions. Councillor Noonan.
Query, Madam Mayor. Given the explanation I think that you gave before that you haven't signed it, that it's an operational, I'm just wondering why we're endorsing it, or why are we required to?
Oh, I think it's quite good, given it's a pretty important topic, that it's got the council's endorsement. Just gives it, gives it good status. Okay, quite happy with that.
So it's not a necessity, it's just an it's a goodwill.
So it's been moved and second. I've got no.
I'm just wondering if we can take it in parts, if that's okay.
To receive and then approve.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I'm going to put the motion that we receive the report. Sorry. Oh, sorry. Debate. Oh, yes, we do on the receiving.
The second, that receiving report. Have
No.
a second.
It's been moved and seconded, I think, already. Oh, did it not be? Oh, I had to ask Elaine. I thought we were rapping along quite nicely at that stage. Oh, we didn't. Okay, would someone care to move or second what is here? I'm happy to move. Do I have a seconder? Do I have a seconder for the putting in the submission? Councillor Egger, thank you very much. Now, I'm just going to do the first part that we receive the report. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. And now we're up to approves retrospectively. Anyone wish to speak to this item? Councillor Neil Stevens.
Kia ora. Thanks, Madam Mayor. I'm actually going to be speaking against approving this retrospectively. Looking at the substantive issues covered in this submission, I actually think that there's multiple points in which it digresses significantly from my personal view, but I also believe it digresses significantly from prior decisions of council and of our priorities this triennium. I note in the discussion around planning some, frankly, I'd have to say almost misleading statements around the resource management enabling housing supply and other matters bill, where it ignores the NPSUD's requirement for Tier 1 authorities to enable greater density around public transport and walking catchments.
Councillor Neil Stevens, I don't like interrupting a debate, but could you just direct us to the page where you think there is a misleading statement? Because that's quite serious for us to put something up.
Page 221.
221.
Yes. The second paragraph under planning section.
221.
Where the bill sets up a very real conflict between the desperate need for more affordable housing and achieving climate change outcomes. For example, the bill allows Tier 1 and Tier 2 councils to provide for much greater density in all their residential zones. There is not requirement for denser housing to be in/close to public transport routes. The NPSUD clearly sets out that Tier 1 authorities, the only authorities required to adopt the provisions of the Enabling Housing Supply and Other Matters Bill, clearly sets out that they do have to provide greater density around public transport and within walkable catchments. I also find some of the, is that clear?
It is, but I'm just wondering, have you made the officers aware of this before?
I did discuss this with officers.
Officers, all right. So I know we're in debate, but I would agree with your comment. So I'm just puzzled as to why it seems like a matter of fact. But keep on going and then we'll see how we go with this.
I also do have concerns around it. It appears to me that the definition we give for a clean fill is incorrect.
Could you give us a page number on that?
I can maybe. Waste.
Apologies, Councillor Neil Stevens. Did you email these to me as well? So I had them as chair.
No, I had an in-person discussion.
Oh, okay. So that's why I'm finding this all a bit surprising at this stage in a meeting. It's okay. So which page?
But also this was one of the last reports I read, and it caught me by surprise as well. Did anyone know where?
So it's page 233. It talks about clean fill.
Page 233. 233. 233. Okay. And Councillor Neil Stevens, can you just highlight that for us since it's your debate?
Yes, actually at the end of page 232, 90 accepts non-organic is a clean fill. So the question doesn't apply to them. That's not the definition of a clean fill. It's inert material such as bricks, things that won't break down. So household rubbish isn't included in that, which isn't necessarily organic, but isn't a clean fill either.
Okay. Notes, you've got the note. Notice. Okay.
Yeah. So that's clean fills, and then I think my primary reason ultimately for voting against this is actually within the transport section, where to me it appears that there's a view being put forward that we should be fearful of people taking public transport instead of walking or cycling, but that fear is not applied to cost prohibitive public transport keeping people in their cars, which we know is the much bigger issue. The substantial changes between emissions of someone biking versus getting on a bus is very minimal. It's the same as someone walking versus
so could you just identify the page number and paragraph you're referring to?
So we're all of 224, 225.
All of page 224 and 225.
But specifically,
Councillor Stenson, would you mind not interrupting while Councillor O'Neill Stevens is in debate? I'm sure he's capable of doing his own debate. It's okay, but it's his debate, and so I'm just giving him the chance to speak to his debate.
Yes, so it's especially the last two paragraphs at the end of page 226.
Last two paragraphs of page 226. All right, which start at
the action stated.
The action stated, right.
So, but it is reflected, and actually above that as well. If the trial goes ahead, we suggest data be collected. We want all of the. There does appear to me within this submission to be an underlying premise that it would be bad or significantly worse to provide affordable public transport and have people move from walking to cycling to a more convenient mode of transport. Particularly low-income people choosing the most convenient form of transport instead of choosing walking or cycling, which from an emissions reduction point of view just does not check out. I am very happy to support the LGNZ and Taituera submissions, but I think that we've, particularly on these three parts, there are other aspects of this where it's not necessarily that it's a position I can't support, but one that I haven't had the opportunity to fully understand, particularly in this submission. We also don't support standardising our waste collection approaches across the country, which to me seems like a very necessary step towards enabling product stewardship schemes and other national schemes that require that base to be financially viable. And so because of all of that, I'm unable to support the submission.
All right, thank you. Now I'm going to just pause and go to the officers because Councillor Neil Stevens says he's engaged with officers about these matters that seem to be materially incorrect. So I just want to understand why the officers have decided not to make those changes after those discussions.
So through the Mayor, I'm having trouble finding who that conversation has happened with. It wasn't with Daniela or myself.
No, okay, well that's not helpful when you're the report.
Depending on the issue. So with Cleanfields, I had a chat to Karen. With Transport, I had a chat to, and Housing, I mentioned that to Daniela.
So the housing one has been raised? Okay, I'm actually going to pause this item because I'm feeling a little bit uncomfortable for the staff when it's been presented that we're putting misleading statements in. So let's pause this one, go back to the forestry advisor. I thought it was going to be a nice straightforward one. So we're not going to do this now, Daniela, because we've got another item that is still waiting. So we're going back to the chief executive's back. So that one's going to pause and we'll come back to that at the end of the day. So that won't be on till 4 o'clock. That one we've just dealt with. Okay, so back to Chief Executive. Now,
So,
I've had a chance to talk to you, so.
and Fiona's had 15 minutes to consider this as well. And if it's right with you, Madam Mayor, I'm invited to join the table.
That's fine, we're in your hands.
Now, depending how far we get into legal advice and risk, we may need
to go into public exclusion. All right, now we do have, we do need to start on at 1 o'clock, so it'll be quite a short lunch break, I suspect, today.
So I will start the conversation and Fiona will correct me as soon as I move from the correct path. But the reason we were down there a while was because Fiona and Madeline were looking back at the legislation that these words come from. And the opinion is that 6.4 stands that the council cannot overrule a decision of a subcommittee that's been lawfully made. It can provide direction. And I think an example of that would be requesting the subcommittee to carry out investigations and directions, which they are doing. But if they have made a decision that they consider is not inconsistent with that direction, then it stands. And directing the forestry committee to defer is overruling a decision that subcommittee has the power to make. So I think that's it in a nutshell. Fiona, was there anything you wanted to add to that? As I say, I'm sorry we've had very little time to consider this, but that's our best advice at present.
Okay. Just before we go to Fiona, and I do, the Chief Executive, feel that I need to say to you, because I don't want you to feel like you're being set up here by the Mayor, that I have not been working overnight on resolution, as was stated earlier on. I have not been working on these matters. Councillor Sampson, can you confirm? Well, I think you might have implied that, and nor has the Deputy Mayor.
So I have liaised with yourself and the Deputy Mayor in preceding days around this, and I've got email exchanges with you
in relation to the questions.
And I was awaiting information.
Yes.
And when I didn't have any further information, first thing this morning, I drafted up my things.
But we've had no input into that draft.
Pardon?
I've had no input into that draft. What
No,
sounds great. No, that's right. I just wanted for clarity for the chief executive. I just think it's really important. Chief executive, I don't want you to feel like I've.
But this hasn't come out of the blue for.
No, we've had a number of questions that we've been getting answers to, and we've been working through that. And I have responded. I did have some real concerns about what you were trying to do this off the back of an activity management plan.
But as with every step of this process, I have been very carefully trying to follow the correct process and asking everybody what is the correct process.
And so
I'm
that's why
trying to
we
follow that.
here. But I just felt there was an impression. So I'm going to go to Fiona now. I'm not going to take any more on that one. I want to clear that impression up.
Got a question?
Thank you,
Yeah,
Fiona.
so the legal principle is that once council has delegated the power to make a decision, it can't then come over the top and seek to rescind or amend that decision. So in this case, and obviously I haven't had a lot of time to look at the detail of this, but I understand that the Forestry Committee has already made a decision to adopt a harvesting plan, and their council delegated that decision-making power to that committee. So that means that council is not now able to come in over the top and seek to rescind or amend that decision. And so it's there in the standing orders, but those standing orders are based on clause 30 of Schedule 7 of the LGA, which clearly says that nothing in that clause entitles the council to amend or rescind a decision that's been lawfully made under delegation by a committee.
Any questions for Chief Executive or Fiona? Councillor Sanson.
Thank you very much. I would just like clarification about what decision has been made, because this isn't actually a harvesting decision. This is a replanting decision, and I'm not aware. I have been monitoring the forestry subcommittee agendas, meetings, any that I haven't attended, I've been listening to, and I'm not aware that they have yet made a replanting decision.
Mr. Labutus.
So through the chair, the harvesting plans that have been through the forestry subcommittee are based on the premise that pine is harvested and replanted. They are one and the same. They stand together. So once you harvest, you replant in pine.
Any other questions?
I've got a subsequent question.
Councillor Sanson. And then I've got the Deputy Mayor with a question as well.
Thanks very much. So I just want to pull up the part in the forestry AMP that I'm referring to. But I did circulate to my colleagues this morning that on page 30 of the 2021 to 31 forestry AMP 4.2.6, post-harvest land management talks in two places and it's got just a very short section, and in two places it talks about replanting being in either the subsequent winter or the next one. So it sounds like there is some flexibility built into that. And what I'm really asking with this is probably a matter of maybe weeks or even a couple of months, not an entire year. So it wouldn't actually push this outside of the guidelines that are within the forestry AMP.
Is there a question in that as to?
So in that case, I question whether this amendment is actually going against
we're dealing with a procedural matter here first, in the first instance. And so the advice, I think, is quite clear in terms of what council's able to do. And what we've had is advice from the Chief Executive and our senior legal counsel that that would not be, that is not procedurally able to be transacted, if I've understood that correctly. If I've got that wrong, Fiona, I think I've understood that.
You're correct that the legal advice is that council cannot do something that would be rescinding or amending a decision that's already been made by the forestry subcommittee. I can't get into the detail.
No, that's right.
So that's as to whether or not that's actually what's happening.
Right, okay. So I'll go back to the Chief Executive.
So I think if it's an argument about whether the forestry subcommittee has made that decision, then I suggest that perhaps Mr. Murray might be invited to join the table as well, and he and Alec can explain what decisions the forestry subcommittee has made.
Right, well, we'll just come to that in a moment. I'll just go to the Deputy Mayor to see if there's anything else, because I don't want to spend too long on this. So, Councillor Eager, any other questions?
Yeah, look, I just had another procedural question around the, we've been talking primarily about resolution 2, and I'm just wondering about the 2 noting resolutions, whether either they are within procedure, but also with regards to number 4, whether the wording is, I guess, quite correct.
No. So I would just say in relation to that, we have already noted it's already in the AMP. We put that in at the Forestry Advisory Group, at the Forestry Subcommittee. So that's already got in number 1. So that's incorporated in the document that's here. So it would be repetitive to do it again. And I think what we've agreed is that all of the documents in terms of AMPs are living documents. So we've recorded that action inside the activity management plan already.
So
we did that at the last
those
meeting.
Points could be noted, or in the minutes even, or
yep, they can be noted in the minutes. I think it's firstly reasonable because we have done that. All right. So just now, did Mr. Murray want to join the meeting as well? Look, I'm just going to say, councillors, I have spent some time on this in the last couple of days because there are a series of questions that came from Councillor Sampson. So I've actually spent quite a bit of time just trying to make sure that there was nothing happening here that would obfuscate the review. So I'm really clear on that, because we've got and the subcommittee did the same thing. So we've made sure that isn't the case. But there are very, very practical and important reasons around land management and forestry management that have been considered by the subcommittee as to why the sequence is as it is. Now, procedurally, I should not really be entertaining this conversation, but actually I want to, because it's been raised, and I just feel at the moment this has become quite a circular discussion that I just want to give the officers their opportunity to explain why they're, not you should have to, but I think you should, given this is backwardsing and forwardsing, it's in a public meeting as to why the steps are taken, and there is no obfuscation around the review. So there's some quite important land management practices that have to be followed. Thank you, Mr. Levertis and Mr. Murray. So
through the chair, I guess there's 2 questions there. The first one is I presented a report to the Forestry Subcommittee on the 1st of December that outlines a clear process in terms of undertaking that high-level council review that will take place as a matter of course. In terms of the issue at hand, I've consulted a number of people, and our view is that the best land management practice for these particular blocks up in the Mai Tai is to get cover back on those slopes as soon as possible. I think that it all comes down to risk, and keeping those slopes open in that particular area, especially with the likes of the Mai Tai River, is a risk. There is a possibility that we will get an intense rainfall event or a prolonged rainfall event that will increase slips and will add to ecological or environmental negative effects. So the view of the group and ourselves is that once those blocks are harvested, that we replant those back in pine. That does not mean that that decision can't be reversed, but at least it provides a degree of cover and stabilization to those blocks in the short term. And that's the view in terms of the best land management practices.
And just in terms of that, Mr. Gorman, who's our independent advisor to the committee, I put these specific questions to him because I said, what if we want to change? He was very clear that leaving that without, doing the land management afterwards to stabilise would be a very poor outcome in terms of sedimentation risk for us. So, Mr. Murray, is there anything you wish to add at this point?
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mayor. I'd reiterate what Mr. Levertis has outlined for the council. The matter did come up in the forestry subcommittee via way of questioning, and the response was that the best forward option was to replant, and then if indeed this review, which is under the resolution of council around the LTB, is to inform the AMP for the forestry group. If indeed that changes the view of the continuation of pine forestry, then the reversal of those plantings is a better option at that point than leaving it fallow as we currently stand. For the reasons Mr. Levertis has outlined, plus also I think there's a question in here of preempting what that review might say or might not say. So I'd be very wary about making decisions about the fact that that review may say we're not planting pine anymore, because we don't know what that review says. So I would be a bit jaundiced taking an action now based on something that might come out of that review, because we don't know. We also have issues. There's also wider issues around spray management. That's a piece. Essentially, one of our consultants described it as a great big block of old man's bed, which I'm sure we don't want. Of course, that's would need a high level of spray management, which we sort of don't really want to do as much as possible. And then with my economic hat on, I'd say that if you didn't plant and you get to the end of the rotation, you're pushing out, you're going to have an economic disadvantage when it may be that the review says carry on. So there's a whole bunch of reasons in here as to why we should just carry on, get the review done, see what it says, and then amend at that point. Which you don't need a resolution to be doing that, because that's what we do anyway, and move forward. Happy to take some other questions.
Right. So just probably the other question that I did have is well, why don't we just leave the pines there? And so we could just cover that off. So mine is, so I've got that part that actually replanting with pine, even if you got to then decide to change to an Indigenous regime, would still be the best land management practice. But then I said, well, what if we just leave the pines and don't cut them?
That's a very good question. So again, we've looked at those harvests via Sam at PF Olsen, and the risk we have by leaving them in situ for another year or two is that we may have loss through wind throw. Which will then also cause issues on the land if we get a high degree of wind throw. Now, some of the figures I'm seeing around wind throw around the region are up to 10%, and so that's quite a chunk out of your productivity just in an event. So we can't leave those on the hill for much longer. It's time to harvest them. That's why they're scheduled. So we need to be working with our program.
All right. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm prepared to allow 10 minutes on this, because procedurally this is a advice is no, but I'm prepared to provide 10 minutes on this because it is really important. We've got matters starting at 1 o'clock, and I want you to have a half an hour break. So that's where I'll go. So who's first in my questions?
Respectfully, Madam Mayor, this is a really significant matter. It's a $17 million decision in my view, and we have spent a lot of time.
You're not first in my speaking order. I've got Councillor Neil Stevens.
So we need to take the time
Councillor
to have this out fairly.
Yeah, no, so councillors, I'm trying to be fair in that it's procedurally not able to be debated today, but I'm just concerned that the way this is being brought forward on a very regular basis is creating an impression that there is obfuscation, and that's just my perception of that. And I just don't think that's fair to the officers or the advisors who have really thought this through. So nothing is stopping what is happening. I'm prepared to take a few questions, and then we're going to close this one off, and then we'll have to. So what's there? The advice is if you want to push through and do it, then we'll have to vote on it, and it'll be up to council whether you want to ignore the advice of the Chief Executive and the Senior Legal Counsel. Councillor Neil Stevens.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. I think just two questions. One on a more operational side, as you've discussed the role that replanting plays in slope stabilisation. How long does it take for pine saplings to provide root stabilisation?
Through the chair, that's I'm not that technical expert, but perhaps one of our Sam or Peter Gorman on our panel will be able to answer that question.
Is Mr. Gorman available?
They are.
Okay. Or if you want to bring them in.
And or Sam, they both are.
It's Mr. Gorman's here. So, here is Sam. I have to just wait for Peter to join us. Peter, is that a question that you're able to answer for us? Oh, sorry, you've only just come into the meeting, so that does make it very difficult for you. So we just repeat the question.
Hi, Sam. Hi, Peter. Just a question around slope stabilisation and root reinforcement. So after harvesting, obviously the stumps and existing roots play a role. How long does it take for pine saplings to reach a point of maturity where they're providing root reinforcement on those slopes?
Thank you, Peter. Well, Sam, whoever wants to answer that one.
Yeah, I can go. So there's a dynamic after you harvest where the stumps of the pre-existing forest rot away and the pines and the weed growth begin to replace that stability. They say that there's about a 5-year risk window, but the highest risk window is initially as all you have is the stumps holding the ground. So the pines, you'd like to say after about age 3, along with the weed growth growing alongside them, provide sufficient stability.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
And then one further question around for Fiona or around the sort of process of things. Obviously, the AMP sets out how the activity will be managed, and that is coming to us for approval. I guess I'm trying to figure out the limitations in terms of, obviously if we're approving it, we have some scope to change that AMP without, even if that has been recommended up from a subordinate decision-making body.
Through the chair, yes. If it's something where the delegation to the committee says that the committee has to recommend something up to council for decision, then yes, council gets to make the final decision on that.
So if the sort of substantive matter in clause 2 was instead addressed as an amendment to the AMP itself, then that would be within our existing delegation structure.
Well, I can't answer in detail in terms of what's covered by an AMP and what's covered by a forestry harvesting plan. But yes, possibly.
Okay. Any further questions, Councillor Sensen? And then we're going to decide whether you're going to transact this, as you've been advised that you shouldn't be, but it has been moved and seconded.
Thanks. So my question is possibly for the forestry specialists up there. Kia ora, Sam and Peter. Rachel Sanson here. Nice to see you both. And thanks for your for stepping in and joining us. So my question is really around what is the risk of delay in replanting for 1 month, 3 months, 6 months, 12 months? I mean, this is the kind of time frame we're talking, and I just would like to understand, is there significant risk in to defer replanting for just a few months, essentially?
Yeah, kia ora, Rachel. So in terms of the risk profile, I mentioned about a 5-year period of lower stability following harvest, but the highest risk period is straight after harvest. So in terms of the risk profile within that 5 years, the risk goes down as you replant over the years. So by deferring it, so for example, for the Mai Tai, the current plan is to replant what's been harvested up till Christmas next winter. But for the Marsden, that's not being planned to be replanted until the winter of 2023 at the moment, because the harvest is going to go beyond Christmas. So that's just to clear that up for the group. So in terms of the Mai Tai, yeah, the group feels that that delaying it by an additional year is exposing that highest risk profile period for that land. And I just wanted to note that we do have setbacks from the streams already planned in the replanting plan.
Thanks, Sam. Any further questions? No further questions? In that case, you've had the advice. Is it, Chief Executive, you've been out of the room for a few minutes. Is there any changed advice in the sense that you're saying this is not something that procedurally is?
No, Madam Mayor, our advice hasn't changed at all.
All right, thank you. So there is a mover and a seconder. Would you like to withdraw what is there?
I think we might be, maybe. I think we've got maybe a change. I'm just waiting. Do you want to speak to it?
Yeah, just amending clause 2 to read, amends the forestry activity management plan 21 to 31 to defer planting pines.
Right, and you don't want to withdraw it, you want to proceed. All right, then into debate, and we're going to make it nice and quick because we're going to get this done in about as quickly as we can so you can get a break. Speaking to it, Councillor, who moved it? Councillor Sensen?
I'd just like to have right of reply if that's possible.
Thank you, Councillor Laurie.
Thanks, I'm speaking.
Sorry, and I think Councillor O'Neill Stevens, were you going to have reserving right to reply as well?
I'll reserve my right to speak.
Yeah.
So that's good. Right to reply, right to speak, and now I'll speak. So I'm speaking for what is on the screen for this recommendation. We heard earlier that this has become a circular discussion, and there's a reason it's become a circular discussion. And that reason is that a significant chunk of elected representatives around this council can't believe that we're doing a review of forestry, but before that review is completed, we're going to plant pine trees on council reserve land that will be there for 30 years. That just doesn't make sense that we would do it in that order. So that's why it's become a circular discussion. And any opportunity we have to actually push pause is an opportunity we should take. And this is an opportunity we have today. And that is not to in any way cast doubt on the good work done by our forestry operators and the subcommittee. It's just recognising that if we're going to have a review, it's best that we do the review before we put the trees in the ground that are going to be there for 30 years. That's what this is about, and that's why I'm supporting it.
Any other speakers? Councillor Rainey?
I'm also going to support this. I mean, I think it's entirely reasonable to suggest that we press pause on the replanting of Pinus radiata until such time as this review has taken place. It's quite clear that the young pine trees don't add to any stability as far as the slopes is concerned for about around 3 years, or was that the time frame that was suggested a few minutes ago? I'm presuming that the forestry review report will come back in that time frame. I think this is something that the people of Nelson, the community at large, absolutely would find resonance with, and I think it's entirely reasonable for us to consider doing this today, and I will support it.
Thank you, Councillor Brand.
Thank you, through the Mayor. I'm actually just going to come back to the public submission that we had yesterday from Sam Weaver, I think it was, and he talked about the transition between established forest establishment and the forestry and how you can transition. And looking at his handout and stuff and having read what he's, the article that he submitted, but also his presentation, I'm actually quite happy with where the forestry subcommittee have actually arrived, and therefore will not be going in favour of this.
Thank you. I'll take a couple more speakers. I don't want to speak to this, but I'll go to Councillor Bywater was first.
Thank you. I won't be supporting this. I could go into a lot of explanation behind why I feel this, and I have been saying this for some time, and I've been asking questions around it. There's a lot of forward impacts as well, which aren't up there, and we don't understand around what would happen if we didn't actually continue with what we have in the plan, for the fact that there's all sorts of, if we go for a conversion, what's going to happen? Is there penalties against us if we don't do this? There's all sorts of other things that actually aren't up here, and we don't understand the fullness of them all. And to have something brought at 7:27 this morning, and then have this up here, and last week we actually went against something that we actually had come through from forestry and governance as well. They're independent, we've got independent chair, there's a lot of other things, and I just want to be respectful. And for me, this is a bit of a challenge at this time, so I can't support it. Sorry.
Thank you. Other speakers? Councillor O'Neill Stevens, then I'll
Thanks, Madam Mayor. I'll be speaking in support of this amendment. I think it's really important to note, and it's made really clear in the delegations register, that no delegation eschews councillors of the responsibility to ensure performance of function or duty. And I think we have a duty to consider issues that are really crucial to our community, and we've heard significant noise about this issue. We're not talking about a significant delay. The review is in track, but in not supporting this, I think there was discussion around that this might be predetermination of the outcome of a review. I think the opposite is more true, that by taking a moment now to look and see what the results are, we'll be able to make decisions that are more financially prudent for our community. I don't think many people or the cover of the Nelson Mail people would be particularly thrilled if it was council goes in and rips out all of the pines they've just planted because of a change in direction. We know that in terms of slope instability, that until pine saplings have had time to take root and to mature, or at least into adolescence, that the benefits and most of the structural support on slopes comes from the roots of harvested mature pine trees. That will not go away, and the time we're talking about delaying this is very small. So the risk there, I believe, is far smaller than the risk of pushing ahead without necessarily knowing what direction we're going in. I entirely respect the advice given to us by the forestry subcommittee, but I also think it's important that we take a high level view and look across all of what we're doing and consider larger considerations of what we're here to do, which is to represent the community. And I think that the communities that I've spoken to and engaged with and have come and engaged with me on this issue would support this, and therefore I will too.
Thank you, Councillor Noonan.
Thank you,
Madam Mayor.
Madam Mayor.
Then I'll speak, and then we're going to the right reply from Councillor Sensen.
I can't support this because I'm sitting here looking at the powers to decide of the forestry subcommittee. We have delegated them to make decisions on forestry and harvesting management plans, including replanting. What's the point in having a subcommittee that we've delegated to and then take the rights away? The most we should be doing is actually referring this back to them. This seems completely wrong. And where are we going to, this is a slippery slope. And I just think the process around this is wrong. If we wanted to, then are we going to look at all subcommittees and take all their powers away? Because why would you bother? We've got independent people on that subcommittee who have got special qualifications that we don't have, most of us. So no, I can't support it. I just think the process is incorrect. Not necessarily the sentiment, but the process.
Thank you. Councillors, I can't support this either. Both procedural issue, but actually for the substantive reason that that this would not be good land management. That there is nothing here that is preventing the review proceeding. The choices will be in front of the council in an informed way. We have land where we have harvest has been undertaken, and slippery slope is the right words, Councillor Noonan. It is slippery slope. It's slippery slope procedurally, but it's also what you would be doing is leaving land bare. And what we've heard is that, you know, if we replant, the instability peaks at 3 years. So it's peaking at 3 years, and we need to do something about this. This is serious stuff where you can't just be changing horses or courses in the middle of a process. If we're going to look after our land, the sedimentation issues, I would hate to think what would happen. It has to be well planned out and thought through. It can't just be suddenly throw the coin up and decide today you're going to do something different. I don't know what the repercussions would be for us in terms of regional, in terms of water quality. You haven't got that information in front of you in terms of land instability, you know, other than you've heard from those people that are professionally qualified to give you advice on these matters, which they have through the Forestry Advisory Group. We worked really hard in the long-term plan to make sure that we can have choices around the future land management. We've got a three-step approach that we've approved through the Forestry Subcommittee, one which involves looking at alternative commercial species, and that information is informed by Pierre Folson, who have sound experience in looking at alternative commercial species. We then have another piece of work that is looking at if we were to revert to indigenous planting, and that has been conducted by a separate expert to do that work. And then we're getting all of that work peer reviewed. All of those things are going to happen, but at the moment, you need to make sure that you don't leave us in a position where you are putting at risk both land instability issues. What you've been advised is that the best thing to do is to, now you've done that, you've got the harvest happening, that you replant, and if you wish to change to Indigenous, then that is a perfectly reasonable thing to do. And Mr. Gorman has talked us through that before. It certainly happens, and that's what you can do. You can change, you can do it in part, you can do it in full. And so I really implore you, I get the passion that's sitting here, but these issues now have been coming back and back and back, and we've accommodated things in the long-term plan. It really is time to actually make sound governance decisions, knowing that you have those environmental choices in front of you, and you'll be able to consider them in a well-informed way. Coming into sign off.
Point of order, Madam Chair.
Point of order.
You're misleading. In fact, did you state that planting pine trees was going to stabilise the slopes before the review, in the time period of the review? Is that what you said?
I've said if you replant, the instability peaks at 3 years, and so you're getting those gains as you go through, and that's what I've heard from our advisors, that they would not want to see the Maitai River left with no replanting on it at the moment. That was their concern, and I've taken that advice. I've questioned again yesterday when I went over these questions, that is my understanding.
So was there some suggestion in saying that?
So I'm not upholding the point of order, and that is my understanding. So councillors, so we're going to wrap this up. We're going to go to the right to reply, but I really encourage you, the door is open for you to look at the review. There's nothing here that is stopping that happening, and you can make choices about whether you go to alternative commercial species, whether you go to Indigenous, whether you go for a mix, whether you keep some in radiata. Those choices are all available to you. Councillor Sampson.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. So I think, first of all, I would like to say thanks to the colleagues that are here in the room and on Zoom. And it's a shame that we have a couple of colleagues not present for this. It's a significant decision. Nelson City Council has been undertaking clear fell pine forestry in our public reserves for around 80 years. Some of this land was donated by Thomas Cawthron, and some of this land was already in native bush and was cleared for forestry purposes. Now, you know, that's a decision that happened in the past. In 80 years, no dividend has yet been paid out to offset the rates burden to the community. And in the 10 years ahead, we have projected log harvest of $17.3 million per the AMP against operational expenses
Point of order,
of
Madam Mayor. Sorry, I don't like the point of orders, but
million.
once again, and correct me if I'm wrong, you've got the officers here. I think some figures there are incorrect in regards to no return.
Right, need to go to the, I will go to the officers to see if those statements are correct.
So those are in the AMP, those numbers are taken directly from the AMP?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. There has been a lot of confusion about the numbers and the return from the forestry. It's probably a point of time for clarification. So historically, the council has reported on what I call a cash in and cash out basis. And in the LTP, it's a cash in and cash basis. And we've been through this before. We had a look at the last 10 years of return from the council forestries. We recalculated those so that we could put it onto a profit and loss basis, which is what a return is. And by doing that, we took out fixed asset additions, which are for some reason expensed, which is kind of weird. And we re-added back in, or the finance team, we re-added back in the revaluation reserves. Now, it's important to note that this is a 28-year business. As we sit here talking about this, these forests grow in value because they're breathing in carbon and putting out oxygen, and they grow in size. So they increase in value just while we're sitting here. So when we recalculated all of that information so that we could return to calculate a return on investment, I think the average there, Alec, was around about 10 to 12%, 11.4%, and over the last 10 years back to council. Now, this word dividend that we keep hearing is quite misleading. So when we talk about a dividend, and this is, I suppose, accounting 101 for councillors, we talk about a dividend in the context of, say, the pool company and the council. That's where you have two separate organisations. One owns the other, and the one that's issuing the dividend, the pool company, is merely transferring money back to its parent shareholder, the council. Right? That's what a dividend is. It's the redistribution of the surpluses back to a shareholder. Now, in the forestry's context, it's all in-house. So every dollar we make sits in the council system. It's used in the council system. So the forestry doesn't necessarily have to pay a dividend because the money is already in the tin. Okay, so that's quite an important concept. Now, having said that,
clarification. I understand.
I'm sorry, you can't point of order,
which is a closed account.
Sorry, you just gave the whole councillor sense and because this has gone around a lot, I'm trying to get a very fulsome answer to this one before I rule on the point of order.
So having said that, the surplus that's sitting in the forestry reserve account, I think it's circa about $1 million, $1.5 million, something like that, is always available to council to take whenever it wants for whatever purpose it wants. We have no need for that surplus simply because we have nothing to do with it. We do not have a mandate, for instance, to go and look for further forestry assets. So, but then I'd caution council in terms of that conversation because you need to look through the transaction. We could say, as they did at the TDC, let's go and buy a motor park with it, or add to the camping ground with that $1.5 million. Go and buy some land. And sure, you would on the books, you'd move the reserve money back into some other fund. But the reality is you'd be straight off to the bank to increase your debt, to refund it, to pay for that. So you're just moving deck chairs around the council at that point in terms of the economics, because it comes back to the same thing. If you want to purchase something with the money that's sitting in the accumulated forestry reserve, then you're going to have to go to debt to do that, which isn't the objective of the council at the moment. So then in another way, so we look forward into the LTP numbers, and I'll just give you a couple of examples. It says 17 in, 17 million out, right? Again, on a cash basis. We have sitting in there the thick end in this year alone, around about $500,000 of asset build. Okay, we built a couple of bridges, one up the Maitai, one up the Roding. And you go, well, okay, well, what point's that? Well, they have wider purposes. They look after the recreational use. They stop people driving through the Maitai when up the South Branch. They are available for search and rescue and flood times. They have a wider use than just forestry. So there is a real benefit for the community and the council out of a forestry asset. which is expensed, which is why it comes out of the operational line. Okay, so that's one example. Let me give you another example. So several years ago, many years ago, the council, Parks and Reserves, goes and buys a bit of dirt up above the Brook Valley so that it can secure the Dun walkway. Now, simply because there was pine trees on that reserve, simply because there's pine trees, it ended up in the forestry. It was never a commercial forestry asset. So in the forestry, we have just spent the thick end of $500,000 clearing trees away to make everybody safe up there, to secure the Dun walkway, which is a Parks and Reserves expense. It's not a forestry expense, it's Parks and Reserves. So if we put that expense into Parks and Reserves, you would have an increase in your rates of about 1% just for that activity, which we've funded out of forestry. So while these aren't obvious from the accounts, because the accounting system is a blunt instrument, it just merely records money in, money out, right? There's a whole lot of benefit going back to the wider community of NCC from our forestry account. Now, we are working with the finance team to try to clarify these things and to try to get them better exposed, but we are within the council system. Sorry, Nikki. So when we talk about returns to the council, the 17 million in, the 17 million out, what does all that mean? Well, actually, it means a whole bunch of stuff other than what you directly see in the LTP. You've got to look through the numbers and understand what they're really saying a bit better. And hopefully that's a bit more clarity for you.
Can I just continue my debate?
No, you can't, because I've still got a point of order to determine. So no, you can't. So what I'm going to suggest is that actually Mr. Murray has done Accounting 101. You've probably got a whole lot more questions about that. We might get him back another day to do a bit more, maybe Accounting 102, and we'll work our way through that. So what I'm going to suggest is that Councillor Skinner, are you prepared to withdraw the point of order? Because what I'm going to say is in the context what I've heard is that we're getting an 11.4% return on investment, and as well as and we've got asset construction going on as well. So
I'm not, sorry if you're asking a question, I want to withdraw the point of order. No, I think it needs to be retracted by the speaker. If they're claiming it, we're not making
let's go for that option.
And they need to clarify, because what happened is the media, misinterpretation.
Let's go for a retraction. How about that? Or reframing.
Yep, I'm really happy to.
That's great. Thank you both for cooperating.
Yeah,
right.
Thanks very much.
Off we go. Finishing the debate.
Thanks very much. So thanks very much for that detailed explanation, Mr. Murray. Really appreciate that. So I guess when I look at the forestry accounts, or let's say bigger picture, Nelson City Council has around 600 hectares of forestry. In the next 4 years, it is harvesting an entire third of its forestry estate, about just over 200 hectares. At the moment, the forestry subcommittee is planning to replant pine on harvested areas. The forestry review work. So I actually procedurally went along to the forestry subcommittee and I very helpfully asked these questions. I applaud the forestry review work that the committee is doing, despite raising my conflict of interest concerns that having the current forestry manager undertaking the independent review may raise, but still, it's great work that they're going to be doing. Then I asked what the intention is around that forestry review work, which is to be completed this financial year. And the intention of the forestry subcommittee, as said to me by the chair and the GM, was that it will be rolled into the next AMP, which is, maybe 4 years away by the time that's actioned. Given that we're just adopting this now, it'll be another 3 years of coming through and then, the work stream. So basically, we're harvesting a third of council's land holdings and we're going to be replanting in pine. If we're not going to be taking any action on the forestry review work, we're going to be 4 years down the slope of unintended consequences if the forestry review work offers something alternative. On a financial perspective, the forestry review and the forestry reserve account is at around about, I think, 2.5 million per the annual, the long-term plan that we adopted in the accounts. At the end of 10 years, it's going to be down to 1 million, despite us having projected log sales harvest of $17 million. So surely, if you're looking at the forestry reserve being a pot of money where all of the forestry money goes around and around, and it, maybe council can use it for other things, but it can't actually take it out. Somewhere, we're losing the benefit of $17 million of log sales harvest because the forestry
That is
reserve.
misleading. I'm just going to get a view on that. So I am concerned about that. So the statement is we're losing $17 million.
No, losing the benefit
of $17 million. So
because the reserve is going to be less than it is
Do you
today,
want me to
about $1
respond to
million
that,
less.
Yeah,
Thank you,
okay,
Mr.
so again, the long-term plan numbers are a very blunt instrument of cash in, cash out. What those numbers don't include, of course, is the revaluation of the forestry at that point in time, at the end of time. So while we say 10 years and that's what's happened, and again, I'd caution council looking at a 10-year window because it's a 28-year growing window. 10 years is just a snapshot at a point in time, and it depends on the state of a whole bunch of stuff. But what that revaluation reserve will do to that reserve at the end of the day, we cannot forecast. You cannot logically put it into an LTP process because that's the process. But when we get there, there will be value in those trees because they'll all be 10 years older and they will have value. Now, yesterday when I was talking to Sam about this, he was saying that year on year it grows by 7% in value. So that's the uplift that you're looking at. That is not reflected in those numbers. So that addresses the 17 million. And look, I'd come back and say around the benefit of that 17 million, at the end of the day, we've got economics and behind this, we've got jobs, we've got wood going into the economy, we've got economic activity in the back of all of that. And there is currently councils around at the moment, and I'm aware of a report that talks about carbon sinking forests, and they're going to Parliament saying we've had enough of carbon sinking of forests because it's not doing our community any good because we're losing jobs and we're using economic outcomes. So while you look at the 17 million revenue, you also got to look at how that 17 million will be spent and what that means for our economic activity in the community.
Thank you. I think
I'll wrap up if that's
Thank you. I think that would be good because we're now.
So finally, I think what I'd like to say is there is no predetermination in this. This is all about prudence, fiscal responsibility, taking a very strategic view, high-level strategic view of an opportunity that we have in front of us to make a future-focused decision for the 21st century that is going to be climate resilient, that is going to benefit future generations, rather than just falling back to the status quo 20th century clearfell forestry position. This is simply a deferral of potentially a few months, maximum 12, I'm sure. And it seems a very, very reasonable and prudent request. So I hope that those of you who understand the significance of this decision and the future that we are trying to create for our community can reconsider your support. And I'm going to ask for a division and hope that you will consider supporting this. Thanks very much.
Call for the division.
So the motion is in front of you on the screen. Councillor Skinner.
Against.
That's a no. Councillor Sanson.
For.
Councillor Rainey.
Aye.
Councillor Neil Stevens.
Aye.
Councillor Noonan.
No.
Councillor McGurk.
No.
Councillor Laurie.
Aye.
Councillor Fulton's an apology. Councillor Edgar.
No.
Councillor Courtney's an apology. Councillor Brand.
No.
Councillor Bowater.
No.
Madam Mayor.
No. Thank you. The motion is lost. 7 votes against, 4. 2 apologies. That does add up. Yes, it does. All right, now we've got we revert to the recommendation in the report. Would somebody care to move the recommendation in the report? Somebody care to move that? I'm happy. Thank you, Councillor McGurk. I'm happy to second that. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Aye. Against?
Aye. That's, I think, 4 of us against.
Sorry,
4 of us against.
No, so this is getting a little bit. I'm sorry, it's a little bit strange. It's carried. Thank you. Okay. I don't know how many it was, but it's carried on the vote of voices. Thank you. Happy that it's carried. We'd like to take the vote again. All those in favour? Aye. Against? No.
It was 4 of us again.
Can I also ask that we've actually had
division would be
No, we've taken the vote.
their masks on?
Okay, councillors, we're starting again in 5 minutes. So we've got people externals joining us. I'm going to need to have a quorum. They have come out of other board meetings to be here, so you'll need to. We're going into confidential. I'll do that now, I think. Would that be right? So I'm moving us into confidential business. We're going to be starting at 1 o'clock, so you will need to stay here. We'll go and grab something very quickly and come straight back in.
What's the first item?
Thanks. Seconded by Councillor Noonan. I'll put the motion. All those in favour. There's some resolutions to go with who's going to remain with us as well. Is it in accordance with the agenda? In accordance with the agenda, the people who are remaining, I'll put the motion. All those in favour. Aye. Against? Carried.
Can I just say that Councillor Sanson has left the table 3 times without a mask on?